6 o'clock. What's going on, you bunch of hooligans? Happy Friday from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Robert Walsh. We got some good news on the Titans injury report as Will Levis was back at practice, but one step forward, two steps back as guard Daniel Brunskill and tackle Jalen Duncan both missed practice after being limited on Wednesday. In Jacksonville, it's pretty much the same as wide receivers Zay Jones and Christian Kirk were both limited. Trevor Lawrence was also limited once again, but did actually throw during the team's open practice portion. Jacksonville can clinch the AFC South with a win over Tennessee on Sunday. And in Baltimore, four-time Pro Bowl running back Dalvin Cook is signing with the Baltimore Ravens practice squad after successfully passing through waivers yesterday. Baltimore in need of some running back depth after injuries at the position to J.K. Dobbins and Keaton Mitchell left the Ravens with a bare cupboard at running back. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Happy Friday! It is Ramon, Kayla, and Will, always brewed up and brought to you by 8th and Roast, getting us ready this morning to head into the weekend feeling good. 8th and Roast coffee cultivates community by the cup. You can find your favorite retail bag in pretty much every food store here, Kroger, Whole Foods, and Publix as well. Looks a little different in here today, but it is Kayla Anderson alongside, you guys know him, one of the Titan greats, Brad Hopkins, joining us. He does this a lot on this show, and we enjoy his presence. Look at that. Can you match that?
Multifaceted.
So what do you call that?
That's the cricket. That's for how many people are in the studio here with me. And
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. That's it. You've mastered that sound effect to a T.
Yeah.
And, of course, Robert Walsh behind the glass, making
Big
it
Bert.
all happen. Bert.
What's going on, gang?
I
How are
know. I'm like, we're going to muster up the energy. We're going to bring it to you on this Friday. We promise you, Ramon and Will have the day off. So we're going to make this happen. And I'm excited because we have a lot of good stuff. We've got a lot of good guests to get to today. And I know a lot of the shows yesterday, Buck Rising did a really great job on his show, kind of paying tribute to the King, if in fact this is his last game in the two-tone blue. And so we wanted to make sure our morning crew got a chance to do that. So at 6:20, we're going to kind of just go over our favorite moments and what's impressed us the most about Derrick Henry in his 8 seasons here in Tennessee. 7:20, our good friend Brent Hubbs from Volquest will join us to talk Vols football, how big this offseason will be for Josh Heupel and company. And then Nate Washington, former Titans wide receiver, really interested to get his take on what this season has been and what he feels they need to do to get back in the groove of things. And then David Ubben from The Athletic, he joined us to talk all college football. We've got a big national championship game coming up on Monday between Washington and Michigan. His thoughts on that and college football moving forward with, of course, the playoffs happening next year with the 12-team playoff. So how's everybody doing this morning? How, Brad, was your holiday? Because we haven't seen you since then.
It came and went too fast.
It always does.
Yeah, we were talking about that before the show actually started, how the buildup kind of makes it this great crescendo, right, to the 24 hours that we get to enjoy Christmas. And, the New Year's, of course, is a week later. But it's almost like the buildup gets bigger and bigger. Thanksgiving is no longer Thanksgiving because Christmas decorations are probably already up, or at least the commercials and the advertisements for A Christmas Story are already up, right? We maybe already seen a couple of renditions of It's a Wonderful Life. But I think Halloween is slowly getting crept up on.
It is.
It really is. I think, at some point in time, you will see Christmas decorations up on November 1st. That's a wrap.
You know what I start to see, guys, and Bert, maybe you can attest to this too. When I'm in like Walgreens or CVS, I know it's getting earlier and earlier each year for the holidays because the candy comes out earlier for every holiday. And I'm like, Wait, we're not even in like what are we in January now? The Valentine's candy is out. Like, so we already know Valentine's is coming up, and that's more than a month away.
You know what, Kayla? I don't know if that's an us thing or if that's a retail thing. Think about it seriously, because like you just said, I went into on Christmas Day. Walgreens is probably the only thing that's open.
Yes.
And I needed to get some kind of box or whatever because my wife was making gingerbread cookies and she needed something to put them in for gifts, right? The last second thing.
Sure.
I already see Valentine's Day candy up and heart boxes and stuff like that for for Valentine's, which is not until February and it's December.
I know.
So they're kind of telling us when we need to start thinking about these things by, when you go into the retail stores, the things that you can buy. I think around Labor Day, you start to see candy being put out for Halloween, which is a month and a half away.
It's crazy.
But still, I think the retail stores tell us when we need to start thinking about these holidays.
Gosh. Yeah. And how late do you leave your lights up?
They're still up right now.
They are?
Well,
Okay.
we did take our outside lights out. So, the outside lights are down. We're kind of coinciding with the neighborhood. When the neighborhood takes their lights down.
Then
not your neighbors, but for those of us that have an HOA. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
When they put the lights up, when they take them down, those are the ones outside are down. But our tree's still up.
Okay.
And the lights are still up. But they'll go down this week. They'll be down this weekend.
Bert, do you have yours up still? The lights?
Oh, yeah. My lights will be up until February. At least. At the very least.
But I can't remember. Were yours colored?
Yeah. They multicolored for the inside, but the outside I always go with the traditional white. The
I love
white
that.
can never look bad.
We
you can always say it's just there to accent your house. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? I'm okay with leaving those up for a while. Like now with Christmas trees, I think the biggest thing if you don't have a fake tree, you have to start taking it out ASAP because it starts shedding and then it stinks. I remember growing up, we had a real tree and a fake tree. The real tree had to go quick. Fake tree would stay up a little. So
the real tree was pretty cool, except when you had to water it and getting those prickly little needles sticking in your arms and stuff when you go to reach underneath the tree and put the water in there. I do prefer the fake tree though. Yeah. Because it looks the same every single year,
I know. As you get older, it's less work too. I think as a kid, you always get excited about the real tree, the process of it. And then you realize when you hit a certain age,
and there's only so much terrain that you can make for the fish when they dump them in the lake, right? I mean, come on, man.
Exactly.
It's like a whole forest down there in Percy Priest Lake.
Yeah. So I'm actually, this has been a weird season, Brad, and you played the game. You've obviously had seasons where it doesn't go exactly the way planned. And I'll tell you, for the first time in my career here covering the Titans, last year, clearly there was a skid at the end. But I felt like it was a little different because they had a lot of hope in the beginning of the season, and they were in the hunt to win the AFC South down to the very last game. This has not been the case this year, but I'm kind of excited to see how things end. And I know it's just one game, but I truly feel like this team could look so different next year. It's kind of like, embracing some of the players that have been here for a minute that might not be here, and that includes Derrick Henry. And it's kind of weird to even think about that this could be his last game.
Thinking about it almost like a college senior. What did was it Harbaugh that said that? Go out and do it for the seniors, or was it Was it
I think
Kalen?
it was Harbaugh. I think Jim Harbaugh who said
go out
that.
and do it for these seniors. No, I'm sorry. I think it was Nick Saban that said it.
Oh, was it Saban? Okay.
Because I think Alabama seniors would have won more games or something like that than any other senior class or something like that.
Yeah.
But either way, it kind of feels like that. The attrition that normally happens on an NFL team.
Yeah.
Guys coming and going. We're used to seeing these familiar faces. And I still hope, even though Derrick Henry's contract is up, the 4-year deal he signed in 2020, I still would hope a popular player that has already gone to a Pro Bowl, rushed for 1,000 yards. It's hard talking about a 5-win team, but he's been the constant, if you think about that. We haven't seen those explosive plays, him stiff-arming folks to the ground, the huge commercial-type plays featuring Derrick Henry that we've seen in seasons past. But he's consistently been somebody that you got to pay attention to. We're still referencing him for guys that can run the football extremely well. You know what I mean? Even in fields like college football. I heard Derrick Henry's name mentioned. Oh, he thinks he's Derrick Henry. If you can still say that, you know what I mean? If you're still synonymous with something, then you're still getting it done. Somebody else would see value in a Derrick Henry, and I hope the Titans do too.
It's really amazing. Yesterday he spoke to the media on his 30th birthday, and obviously very jovial. And the guy doesn't seem, and I know he hasn't been as explosive, and you haven't seen as much out of Derrick Henry in terms of the stiff arms this year that we've seen in the past. And it's hard to attribute that all the way to the offensive line because he is getting older. But at the same time, I still feel like Derrick Henry has stuff left in the tank. I mean, this guy takes incredible care of his body, more so than I've ever seen anybody in terms of an athlete at the running back position, at least. The things that he does in the offseason, so innovative. It seems like he has such a kind of consistent way of doing things, even so that when I talked to Tajay Spears yesterday about it, Brad, and saying, hey, this could be the last time you're in this, locker room with him. What has it been like to learn from a guy like this? And he goes, it's been incredible. And he goes, so much so too, like even his diet, like the guy is so to a T on everything he does. I don't think there's many guys who can continuously keep that up.
I've seen him dragging a guy's living room across the football field and using a car motor as a tricep.
Yeah.
Come on, I'm just joking. It's the State Farm commercials.
Yes, I know the State Farm commercial. He's also an actor.
Exactly.
Yes, he is.
But I still think that, a Derrick Henry type, imagine Derrick Henry if he received the handoff and didn't get touched for like 3 seconds. Think about that. Just count it out in your head. 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. Then he gets contact. How far down the field do you think Derrick Henry would be? That has not been a luxury for this team. So you need to have an explosive guy, maybe that can catch the ball in the backfield more consistently, like a Tajay Spears, or someone has that quick twitch muscle response to where they can get going immediately versus like Derrick. Derrick takes a couple of years to get going nowadays. Not saying because he's 30, but just that's this running style, downhill between the tackles versus a guy that stretches the line of scrimmage sideline to sideline and makes the defense really respect him that way. That's how they flip Tajay Spears into the mix, right? The guy that can get to that edge pretty quickly, even despite the issues of guys being around his feet in the backfield. Just imagine what that would look like if Derrick Henry had at least 3 seconds before he got in contact. Well, first off, that meant that the line of scrimmage is being moved. That means that guys aren't just penetrating and jailbreak left and just hanging around Will Levis or Ryan Tannehill as he's handing the ball off, and therefore there's nowhere for Derrick Henry or whoever's in the backfield to go. That has to be more consistent. We have to be able to balance it out, be less predictable in those situations where we could run or pass, right? Because it's both effective. But still, controlling the line of scrimmage, giving these guys a platform to be able to work with, that would produce almost a different mindset for Derrick, even if he's 35. Goodness.
Absolutely. We will continue the talk about Derrick Henry as this could be his final time in a two-tone blue uniform on Sunday when the Titans take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. King Henry's reign has been legendary in Tennessee. I know I'm interested to get your perspective on what's impressed you the most about his time here, his growth here. I'm going to share a couple of my stories covering him for the last 8 seasons. And we want to get your input. We'd love to hear from you. 615-737-1045. You can also chime in on the FNM Bank chat. We always love all of the chatter there. Yesterday, the chat was popping. So keep it up. And on Twitter, at Kayla Will, at Ramon, Kayla, and Will. And we'll be back with more Derrick Henry talk here on 104.5 The Zone. Ramon, Kayla, and Will. Welcome back into Ramon, Kayla, and Will here on 104.5 The Zone. It's time to win you some money. Welcome back into Ramon, Kayla, and Will on this fine Friday in Middle Tennessee. And welcome into anybody who's listening from other parts of the country. And I just realized Brad Hopkins in for Ramon Foster today. Will Bowling has the day off as well. I realized that I forgot to do our Friday vibe. So I promise everybody that will be coming in the 7 o'clock hour.
The Friday vibe.
It's our music that we always
shut up.
listen to.
You know I like the music now.
Yeah. And so that always gives me an excuse to do karaoke on a Friday. You know, it's just, it gives you the good vibe. So we'll bring that to you in the next hour because I just plain forgot. So we've been talking about if this is perhaps the last time that we see Derrick Henry in a Titans uniform coming up on Sunday when the Titans host the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mind you, who Derrick Henry in his past has had a lot of success about. It's technically where he grew up there in Duval County. So whenever he plays the Jags, I feel like, you know, he always wants to have a good game. That has not happened this year for Derrick Henry for the most part against AFC South opponents. He's had so much success against them in the past. This year has been very different in that way. And look, the Titans don't have a win right now against a division opponent, which is crazy. So they're hoping to end the season with that and hoping to send Derrick off in style if that is the case. I wanted to pick your brain, and we would love for you to join in on the conversation, 615-737-1045. What do you feel like when you look at Derrick Henry's time here in Tennessee from the moment that he was brought in, obviously coming in from Alabama, having ton of success there. And throughout the last several years, what do you see his career as here and how impressive has his growth been?
It wasn't an immediate impact, in my opinion.
Nope.
He didn't come in here kicking the door in and all of a sudden just be recognized as the King Henry. He didn't. It did seem as though that conversation that he had with Eddie George, you know, maybe being a more physical runner kind of then got us on the idea of thinking, yeah, this guy can take over a ball game by being physical, by having an attitude. So that adjustment in his game right there seemed to be the turning point for who Derrick Henry would go on to be. He was this team's identity. You know, think about that. He mirrored what Mike Vrabel's style would be, which is just crush you into the ground, exhaust you with the run game, lean on you until you submit. And over time, that came to be synonymous with this offense, right? Mm-hmm. I think Art Smith gave a plenty of attempts, you know, for that to be the case. So I think that he pretty much established who we thought the Titans offense was going to be. Just, you know, grind you into the ground, make a play here through the pass here and there. But for the most part, we're going to establish the line of scrimmage and we're just going to hit you in the mouth until you gave one of those big, huge 20 or 30-yard plays to Derrick Henry. And next thing you know, he's at 1,000 yards for the year, right? That's the reason why he's second on the list in rushing for this franchise behind Edward George. So I think that at some point in time, after that conversation, Kayla, it really came to be that Derrick Henry wanted to establish himself as a bruising-type running back that was hard to bring down, that nobody wanted to tackle. And people start referencing getting stiff-armed to the turf by like being Derrick Henry because that's what he was synonymous with. So that's what I think at some point.
And you're right. It is crazy when you think back and what has been the most impressive to me covering Derrick Henry. And I was not here his first season. I came here the second season. So what I remember is clearly coming out of the draft, there was a lot of talk about, you know, how many carries Derrick had at Alabama. And, could he do it when he got to the NFL? Could he carry that load still? Because he had so many carries there. They used him. He was a workhorse there. And that was maybe the thing that people were thinking he couldn't do, so he maybe dropped a little bit for that reason in the draft. Because that was Ezekiel Elliott, too. I was covering Ezekiel Elliott at Ohio State when he won the national championship. He went like third overall, I think, in the draft. And obviously, Derrick Henry was not a first-round pick. And you look at, like, the value now in some of these picks that we a lot of the time say John Robinson did not have a great overall, you know, several years in terms of draft picks. But there were some that are extremely valuable, and Derrick Henry is one of those. And it's crazy to think about, like, Derrick Henry. When I first got in here, I would sit up in the press box with Corey Curtis at News 2 where I worked, and we would see him run left to right. And we're just going, what is this guy doing? And DeMarco Murray, obviously the lead back at that time here in Tennessee. And it would be so frustrating because we're just like, what is this guy doing? This is not the Derrick Henry that you saw at Alabama. And, Alabama fans, you could tell, there's so many here, and we would talk kind of not bad about it, but be like, he's not progressing. He's not getting any better. Like, what's going on? This isn't the Derrick Henry we've seen. And Alabama fans would send nasty emails like, what are you talking about? Derrick Henry is awesome. He wasn't, though. I mean, you look at the first 2 seasons, really. The first season in 2016, again, not getting a majority of the workload, but 490 yards. He played in 15 games. He had 5 touchdowns that year. And then the next year, 2017, 744 yards. So that increased a little bit. 5 touchdowns in that season, played in 16 games. But then after that Eddie George talk, and there was talk about even trading Derrick Henry after those 2 seasons. There was talk about it. There was rumblings about it. And that talk with Eddie George, I have never seen something like that where a player immediately changes the way he plays on the field. Immediately after that conversation with him. Did you ever talk to Eddie about that? Like, and just what he maybe said? It's just incredible that switched with Derrick Henry. And that just goes to credit Derrick Henry. Like, okay, I need to do something different, and I'm actually going to do it.
Eddie used to run, well, first off, he led our charge usually out to the field, and he talked about controlled rage. That was an element of emotion that he brought to the football field that didn't seem to be part of Derrick Henry's repertoire. You know what I mean? Just that, because Derrick doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve to kind of tell you what he's thinking or how he's feeling, regardless if you're having a good game or a bad game. He's just kind of very level, But Edward, man, he just, you could tell he was pissed off about some things, you know what I mean? Or he was going to say something vocally, or he was just going to, by simple reaction, give you that emotion that people can see and respond to, you know what I mean? Maybe he was asking him to step up that, approach a little bit. Just be more emotional when you have the ball in your hands. That way you wanting to, inflict that pain, But I do think, and one of the, somebody on the chat was mentioning, good receiving core that lends to the balance of an offense, because you have bodies stacked at the line of scrimmage when you don't have any deep threats. When you don't have any passing threats, it's easier to stack the line of scrimmage and slow down Derrick Henry and send extra bodies out of the secondary into that backfield that can then befuddle the run game. But when you have legit targets that can actually beat you, that can actually get you those chunk plays and big yards despite the run game, now that keeps bodies out of the box and in the secondary, which makes it easier then for him to win one-on-one matchups, linemen win one-on-one matchups, receivers on the edge are blocking and run plays, and next thing you know, you got a guy that's really helping take over a ball game. And you're also dealing with the sticks that aren't as challenging when you're talking about 3rd and 10 and plus, which is, that's a hard completion for anything right there. 3rd and 5 or less. I mean, come on, man. Play action, RPO, all that stuff's wide open, especially if you got a quarterback like Will Levis. So I think that having the combination of good, legit receivers, a good tight end, someone that consistently find that crease and be an available receiver for a quarterback that gets into trouble. Or maybe he's the feature in the first place, and you got to try and stop him because he's getting 5-6 yards a catch, and the offense is moving, and the defense is having problems getting off the field. So you got to have that balance, even though we talk about taking over a game with the run game. But I think with Eddie and Derrick, to me, it was him finding that spark, you know what I'm saying, that we knew Eddie wore visibly on his sleeve. That controlled rage I talked about. Controlled! I can still see the veins on Eddie's bald head, just sticking out when he was telling us that we need to play like that. That's just not Derrick's personality. It's not he gonna sit there and start grab a dude by his numbers, be like, come on, man, let's go. You know what I mean? But sometimes it's like, you would need that because we respond to that in a minute.
I'm sure you did.
Heck yeah, you got this big old 6'3", 240-pound running back who just ready to just breathe, just snot fire coming out of his nose. You're like, oh shoot, I gotta get going for this cat. You know what I mean? And it gets you going.
Yeah, and Derrick is a different type of leader, and he always has been here, and he was that way at Alabama. he's a quiet leader, but he leads in a way that he's going to prove and lead on the field in his play. And he has done that here, and that has been incredible to watch. And I'm sure fans have loved every minute of that too. And he gets his team fired up in different ways. It might not be as vocal, and we've seen his career because he is kind of a simple guy. He said on his birthday he was just celebrating it with his girl and his little girl. And, they're just going to have a birthday cake. That's a Derrick Henry. Simple on the outside, but when he gets on the field here in Tennessee, he has been one of the most exciting things to watch for fans here, but for also fans in the NFL. People know who Derrick Henry is.
Yeah. The stiff arm was the emotion that I talked about, because that was an act that Derrick Henry pretty much made synonymous with his running style that did sort of seem like it was emotional, right? When you're trying to dial up Derrick Henry and get your hands on him and you move in the other direction, he puts that paw on you and just pushes you to the ground violently. That's kind of emotion, you know what I mean? Like, because everybody responded to that, or him just flat out running somebody over, because he's got the high knee going and he's just trying to break the line of scrimmage. But yeah, I think that also this club didn't have that celebrity. You know what I'm talking about? Like, Steve McNair didn't come into the game as a celebrity, but he was Air McNair and had a little bit of cachet to him. Eddie came in as a Heisman Trophy winner, just like Derrick, but still, he kind of came in with some expectation in that he was going to, be this guy that he was in college. Now, I remember the comparisons between Mark Ingram and Najee Harris and these guys that were typical Alabama backs, right, and how they do things. And there was some element of that when Derrick came here, but it just wasn't like he wasn't comfortable in being the guy, so to speak. They just kind of take over a game like that. Eventually, he became that person.
Yeah.
But I'm still thinking that running style, that physical brand of football that, then created the Titans' only, let's just say, Madden cover-worthy guy. I'm talking about somebody that, because every NFL team, or at least most of them, has that celebrity, quote unquote, right? This isn't that kind of market here. This isn't the L.A. market, New York market, or one of these larger cities that house an NFL team to say this is a household name. But at some point in time, his play became a household name, and we started identifying this franchise with who Derrick Henry was on the football field.
And that's why I think it's so hard right now for this even to be on the minds of Titans fans, that this could possibly be the last time that he is here, because he has been the brand. And for Titans fans, there's been a lot of frustrations throughout the years, even in, the winning seasons that they've had here in 2020, 2021. Like, there still was the wide receiver issue and, couldn't get in the right free agents in those situations. Now you see D-Hop. That's finally been kind of calming them down in that aspect, because before it was a thing. You're bringing in these free agent wide receivers. They weren't working out. Like, you trade away A.J. Brown. That's been kind of a thing that Titans fans have had to deal with. But in the meantime, you always had Derrick Henry. And he was like the solid foundation, the consistency part of this team. And that's why I think it's hard for fans to, know that they could possibly be parting ways with him. But it's the business, and he admitted it yesterday. And I give Derrick Henry a lot of respect this season, knowing that this could be the case, the way he's handled himself. Yesterday, he said, sometimes you need a year like this to be able to grow, talking about just a down year for this team and personally, individually for him not having as big of a year as he had in the past. He said, you got to have that to be able to learn, to be able to reflect. He said, I'm definitely going to do that once the season is over. If I wasn't fueled before, I'm definitely more fueled now, definitely more hungry. So no matter what happens with Derrick Henry, he's going to be playing next year.
Yeah, think about that, what you just said, though. Derrick ran for 1,000 yards behind this offensive line.
1,014 yards, I must say, and 11 touchdowns this year, and that does not count this game on Sunday.
How are you going to feel watching him rush for 1,000 yards in a different jersey next year? Because he's going to do it.
Not be good.
If he's on the field next year, even at 30, for the most of the season, he's still going to get 1,000 yards behind if he's a free agent, he can go where he wants to. I'm sure he's going to be thinking about who's going to be blocking for me as part of the metric of whether or not he goes to that franchise or not, right? He's not going to beat his head up against the wall for another season. So I would imagine him finding a destination that is better equipped for his skill set one that can help him create those avenues that bring the King back to relevance again, right? So just think about that. How will you feel? It'll be another A.J. Brown situation all over again. Watching him
If not
compete.
worse. Because Derrick was here a lot longer than A.J. Brown was.
But you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
A.J. Brown leaves here, and some people were questioning the decision that the Titans made to see getting some value back. The Traylon Burks, Malik Willis, all those things that we got back for a guy that we watched playing in the Super Bowl. And we're saying the one element that this offense needed before they got D-Hop was A.J. Brown, and we watched him have success someplace else. The same thing will rear its ugly head if you watch Derrick Henry, who rushed for 1,000 yards between this pothole of an offensive line next year when he's doing it for somebody more consistently. Shoot, dare we say him behind some, like a Dak Prescott type. Are you kidding me?
Well,
if he leaves, listen. If
you
he
follow that Eddie George path.
the Eddie George path to Dallas, because think about that. Jerry Jones loved him.
You know,
some
Derrick
Eddie George.
lives in Dallas, too, in the
Stop.
offseason.
See,
He
stop.
does.
Stop it.
Sorry, I'm not trying to put this out in the
stage.
universe,
You're already
people.
setting the stage. So Derrick Henry coupled with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. Okay? That's what the pundits are going to start pushing out there if all of a sudden this comes a reality, the fact that we're willing to not re-sign him and you know keep this guy in the fold, have him retire as a Tennessee Titan. That's what he should. You let him go down to the NFC right there and start doing some things behind that offensive line too. Got the Smith brothers, Tyler and whatever, Tyron, and some other interior linemen that have really getting it done, flat out, Pro Bowler types consistently every year. You're gonna be like, oh my God, he used to do that for us. And hopefully his complement, his replacement, hopefully will be getting some yards because he's going to be compared to and have to fill some pretty big shoes.
Absolutely. And you know what? Maybe they find a way to re-sign him. Maybe he, finds a way to come back here and wants to retire as a Titan. That is to be determined. But we will not know that answer here for a little bit. We'll continue this conversation a little later in the show, and we always encourage you to chime in on just what you have enjoyed the most about Derrick Henry's career here in Nashville, 615-737-1045. But coming up next, speaking of running backs, one running back thought he had no shot at the playoffs this season. Now he has a legit chance to compete for a Lombardi trophy, and Burt might be smiling back there. We'll show you who that is next on Ramon, Kayla, and Will here on 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back into RKW on this beautiful Friday morning in Middle Tennessee. Kayla Anderson, Brad Hopkins with us today. Of course, Robert Walsh making it all happen behind the glass. Hope you guys are having an incredible start to your Friday morning, whether you're traveling to work or, hey, maybe just enjoying an early weekend. We hope to usher it in the right way. We've been talking a little bit about Derrick Henry to start the show and possibly his last time in a Tennessee Titans jersey on Sunday when they face the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll continue that conversation as well, and feel free to chime in 615-737-1045. From one running back to another one, Brad, and I will add this too about Dalvin Cook. This is a guy who Derrick Henry is on record many times as saying an incredible back. Derrick has had so many good things about Dalvin Cook to say in the past when Dalvin was in Vikings territory, specifically doing what he was doing up there. Now, Dalvin Cook has had a lot of injuries, and he has dealt with those injuries almost every season. I feel like it's been something. Brought over to New York, the New York Jets this past season to, at the time, help Aaron Rodgers and company really push to make that playoff, possibly Super Bowl, appearance this year. And then everything happened in the first game of the season where Aaron Rodgers, has the Achilles injury. And from then on, the dreams dissipated there for the New York Jets. So Dalvin Cook really hasn't done anything in New York, and they allowed him to, move on, and now he has signed with the Baltimore Ravens. And this was per his agency, who let that out first last night, LAA Sports Entertainment. So the four-time Pro Bowler, Dalvin Cook, is now going to have an opportunity to compete for a Super Bowl when his first stop, that was his first goal, to compete for a Super Bowl there. So really an incredible situation for Dalvin Cook. I mean, I don't feel like that happens all too often. The Jets paid Cook $6.8 million this season. Now, again, that $6.8 million, he'll have a chance to maybe hoist the Lombardi Trophy. I'm wondering what Bert thinks about this too, so we'll get his thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, hold on a second, Bert, before you jump in there. 67 carries for 214 yards is what he amassed as a Jet. This was going to be Breece Hall's backfield, and we know the special player that he's becoming. But Dalvin Cook, like you mentioned, through the injuries that he's been plagued with, he's not even the best cook boy in the Cook household.
No, he's not.
Because they're talking about let James cook up in Buffalo for a reason, because the kid is having a tremendous year and is surpassing Big Brother at this point for being the best cook running back in the family, right?
It's impressive.
But we do understand, the cachet that Dalvin Cook with his past success can bring, and him rushing for an offense that their quarterback is the leading rusher by far, mind you. Lamar Jackson is far surpassing Gus Edwards, who is second on the list, for most rushing yards on that team. He should fit in there nicely with how they use the running back. And I get it. Lamar Jackson has shown himself to be totally multidimensional this year, in that he's not just some running threat, which, of course, with the ball in his hands, he's probably one of the most electric guys out there. Mm-hmm. But he has that good passing ability, too, that has, proven a lot of the naysayers about him being a quarterback wrong. He's just unbelievable with whatever he does with the football, whether he's throwing it or whether he's passing it, and he's starting to show that balance. But he's still going to be, because of who Lamar Jackson is, the leading rusher on a team. So a running back is just a compliment to what he already brings to the table.
Absolutely. What do you think, Bert?
Big Bert?
It doesn't really move the needle that much for me.
Yeah.
An offense that was kind of already humming, but a hell of an insurance policy.
Sure.
As Brad noted, he didn't really have a lot of success in New York. His longest run of the year was 14 yards, didn't have a touchdown. But, Brad, I also wonder about how much location can change a player's worth. If maybe being in Baltimore in a different system with a different offensive line, we all know the Jets have been much maligned this year with trying to keep offensive linemen healthy. Do you think he could see a boost in productivity moving to a place like Baltimore, where Lamar might open up some more running lanes for him by drawing the attraction of the defense?
Great point, Bird, because that is the case. When you're dealing with a Lamar Jackson style offense, it does create those situations where you don't either rush him hard because you don't want to create those, passing lanes or rushing lanes for Lamar Jackson, or the unpredictability of play action or however they're going to use the running back in those situations. We have seen more success. We have seen them more fluidly move the football than the Jets, who lost Aaron Rodgers' fourth play into the game, into the whole season. So you knew that they were already under fire. And I would imagine, that this is an easier road to hoe when you're talking about being behind that offensive line, comparatively speaking. Now, I admit it, Breece Hall is he's a special dude. The guy, he's incredible. So he didn't outshine Dalvin Cook, didn't outshine Breece Hall to even get a balance in the carries. This wasn't a split backfield by any stretch. But you're right. I think that with less difficulty, he would find himself not only in the playoff situation, but probably more fluid in that offense once they do go to the running back. Now, I'm sure that, he's behind Gus, if not, if Gus is injured or however the situation plays itself out. And I'm sure that the ample opportunities that he gets, he'll be able to do some things. But, yeah, I would imagine that he feels in his own heart of hearts he's going to a better situation, Kayla.
Dalvin Cook in his 7th season. We were just saying Derrick Henry in his 8th season. And a lot of what Dalvin Cook did in the height of his career is also what Derrick Henry did. That's why the two were talked about at the same time as being some of the best backs in the league. And that's why Derrick referenced him so many times, as I respect him so much in his game, because it's really like 2019 to really 2022. Dalvin Cook was still in the 1,000 yards rushing mark, averaging, I think in 2022, he averaged 4.4, 2021, 4.7, 2020, averaged 5 yards per carry. So he was kind of in the thick of his career as Derrick Henry was here, as he was in Minnesota. But now you see, Brad, 7th season in the league. Is that the point where these backs kind of realize, okay, if I haven't won a Super Bowl yet, maybe I just got to go and finish my career off somewhere where I'm going to win a Super Bowl? And that's why I keep thinking, too, with Derrick Henry, like, does he realize that, or is Derrick Henry just completely different in terms of what he can do the rest of his career?
Well, if you think about it, being available at this point in the season, the team is making a push for a reason, because they have a lot more football to play. If this was the last weekend of the season for the Baltimore Ravens, why would they make a pitch for a guy that they could, maybe talk about doing next year, or somebody else from the draft, or another free agent that's available? Because there's a bunch of running backs that are available this upcoming, season.
Right.
You do that because you still think that you have something to play for. So the guy that you're now acquiring, he knows that too. We're back in the mix now, fellas. We got some more. I got February football to play probably, versus being on the Jets, whose season is going to be over after this weekend. So the team made a move because they needed him, because there's more football to play. And he knows that too. So I think that, him coming into the mix. Now, it will seem like they made him more. The Vikings made it seem like he's more vulnerable. When they're willing to move on past the guy that was their bell cow, was a huge part of their offense, and him not being available, just kind of made it easier to say, the sun has set on Dalvin Cook, But if he goes in there and gets a couple of touchdowns, does some things sparingly in this offense, and helps the Ravens win a championship, now we'll be talking a little bit differently about Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, it'll be amazing to see some of these backs that came in at the same time who outlasts who. And I think Derrick Henry might be the guy who outlasts them all. Coming up, we've got 1 hour down already. Crazy how the time flies on a Friday, but we will touch on the Titans' current status for Will Levis on Sunday. Good news, he was back out on the practice field. I'll let you know the update on how he looks and if it's trending in the right direction. That's coming up next on RKW here on 104.5 The Zone.
What's going on? 702. Good morning. From the 1045 The Zone Studios, I'm Robert Walsh. We got some good news on the Titans injury report as Will Levis was back at practice, but one step forward, two steps back for the Titans offense as Daniel Brunskill and Jalen Duncan both missed practice after being limited on Wednesday. In Jacksonville, pretty much the same as wide receivers Zay Jones and Christian Kirk are both limited. Trevor Lawrence was limited once again, but did throw during the team's open practice portion while he's dealing with a shoulder and finger injury. Jacksonville can clinch the AFC South with a win over the Titans on Sunday. And in Baltimore, four-time Pro Bowl running back Dalvin Cook signing with the Baltimore Ravens practice squad after successfully passing through waivers yesterday. Baltimore in need of some running back depth after injuries at the position to J.K. Dobbins early in the season and Keaton Mitchell a few weeks ago left the Ravens with a bare cupboard at running back. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Happy Friday and welcome in to another edition of Ramon, Kayla, and Will. It's chilly outside, but we're going to warm you up here as we head into the weekend. Of course, always brewed up by 8th and Roast. Actually, just went and made a pot of coffee, and we'll see how that turns out, fellas. We'll see how that turns out. A new roast from that has a little graham cracker in it, a little peanut butter, so we'll see how that goes. But 8th and Roast, locally owned and operated by lifelong friends turned business partners who designed the local shops as a way to feel welcome, connected, and a part of the community, and they have done just that. 4 locations. You can even check them out in the airport. They've got 2 locations there. We have a good show for you today. Already 1 hour down. I'm Kayla Anderson. Brad Hopkins in the building this morning. Always happy when you are able to join us, my friend. Robert Walsh behind the glass. And on Friday, I promised you folks, because I didn't do it in the first hour, we're going to act like it. For all the workers, they work 9 to 5. Party. Are you starting to memorize this, Brad?
Oh, I know it already.
I love it.
Been on here enough with you to remember this song. Yeah, for sure. I love how the AI can go back and forth between an ethnic dialogue. You know, we gonna act like it, but then speak proper.
And you know, Rhett Bryan does those introductions.
Does he?
Yeah. He does so many of them. He has about 80 million voices. Very talented.
What does AI know about gators, for real?
Right?
Exactly. Do they even wear shoes?
Man, AI can do many things.
I can see Ramon in some gators. That sounds like something referencing Ramon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big old size 16s or wherever he wears, probably.
Yep. Ramon and Will, day off, and hopefully they're getting some rest and recovery. But we're holding it down here because we've got a game to talk about this weekend. We've got a national championship going on the college side. David Ubben will join us in the 9 o'clock hour to talk about that. Nate Washington coming up at 8:20. Brent Hubbs in 20 minutes to talk Vols and the excitement headed into their offseason after Nico Iamaleava and company really get people excited for the future if you're a Vols fan. So that will be fun to talk about. But as for the Titans and their game on Sunday, exactly who will be out on the field? Because it seems like every Sunday it just becomes less and less in terms of some of those starters that we're seeing. And I'll admit, Brad, when I went to practice on Wednesday, I was like, is there anyone on the field? There was so many guys in terms of the starters that were resting or obviously on the injury report that it looked like a high school practice. Like, it was crazy. There were not many guys out on the field. Now, yesterday, you saw most of them back out there, and that included Will Levis. He was practicing, and he was limited. He's obviously got that foot injury, but on top of it, still not completely healed from the ankle injury. So I think the big question, Brad, coming into this game, like, do we need to see Will Levis? I know he wants to play. I know he says it's annoying that he's going through these issues, and I get it because that guy is a competitor. But do we really need to see him? Has he proven enough at least to be the starter next season?
I think if you put him out there, it just continues bad habits that could develop when you're scared of the pocket. You know what I mean? I think we've seen a confident Will Levis that seems like he's invincible to injury, standing in the pocket, scanning the field, but then if you've been hurt enough, you start automatically subconsciously thinking about, well, shoot, these guys are coming off the edge fast. I got a guy on my face every time I'm delivering the ball. We heard Ryan Tannehill, his comments after the game. There was barely time for him to do anything, right?
Yeah.
So at this
Feels
point,
like
if you're not, right, yeah, exactly. If you're
John
not
Wick,
100%, I know who you meant. We all know who you meant. If you're not 100% at this point, what are you trying to prove? There's a season left on a 5-win season. Obviously, there's a lot more football for you to play next year. Why add injury to insult by putting him out there? Why not give Ryan Tannehill the start again? Because maybe it'll want him to. I think that like Teresa Walker.
You're still stuck on this, huh? And not in a bad way. I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing.
I think Teresa Walker from the AP, she said on it best. I was reading her comments on Twitter talking about Ryan Tannehill returning as the backup, okay? Now, I get it. If you feel you're a starter in this league, well, go out and take somebody's job. But then wouldn't it be a similar situation that you're going to get into backing up a young guy that a franchise has already invested in? Because that's going to be the case. Unless you're going to go to some place that you think you can dethrone the veteran, then go ahead and be that because you're going to be the backup anyway. If you don't feel that this team has a future and you really want to play for championships, then consider that as well. Or you can stay with the same team that you've been with, the one you had the most familiarity with over the past 5 seasons, and you can come off the bench because we know that the backup quarterback is the most popular most popular position on everybody's field. That's just the way it works until he gets in there, can show certain things. Then maybe it's even competitive. But at this point, I think that understanding your role on a team, being someone that can, be there as a safety valve for a squad if it's needed, especially with developments up front, it might even cause further injury to a young quarterback that then you need a veteran presence to kind of come in there. And Ryan Tannehill could serve that purpose. But putting him out there or even seeing what Malik Willis's value could be if, in fact, he's not going to win anything other than the emergency quarterback job. You know what I mean? Maybe another young college kid comes in this year's draft and pushes him out the door. Well, you got to see that, what you can get for Malik Willis by putting him in the lineup. But I would imagine them not putting Will Levis in the lineup makes the most sense to me. Because I wouldn't want to put him out there in front of this patchwork offensive line to have his further getting healthy be that much more complicated in the offseason.
I know many of you who are listeners, who are Titans fans, were a little bit hesitant of it even last game. And it was kind of split from what last week in terms of the calls that we had. It was kind of split on whether or not you wanted to see him out there. And Ramon definitely swayed me in the direction of, oh, yeah, put him out there. Like, let's see how much more he can, get in terms of the environment because they were on the road last weekend and, building that confidence. And I think more selfishly, I just like to watch Will Levis play. I think he's an exciting player. I like the passion he plays with. It's exciting. Like, it makes the team right now that is not fun to watch. It's made it fun to watch, at least in some aspects, with Will Levis.
Is it going to be fun to watch him getting the crap knocked out of him?
And that's the thing.
Okay.
And I don't want to see him out here this weekend at all.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I understand Will Levis. He's a competitor. He wants to be out there, but we got to make sure what's best for Will Levis in the future. And that's not getting his leg now broken off. He's already had the ankle injury in the right leg. He's already had the foot injury. I don't want the whole leg to go. Like, let's just keep him off the field. Because when I'm reading the injury report, Brad, I'm serious. It's like a trickle effect or something. When I'm looking at the injury report, and Bert said this in the updates, Daniel Brunskill, who, by the way, congrats to Daniel Brunskill. He is the pretty much good guy of the year. That's right.
Nice.
He is the best with the media. He has been phenomenal with us this year. He is always in the locker room, always available, has thoughtful answers. And yesterday, He joins Kevin Byard on the list. We've only been doing it for 2 years now. Teresa Walker presented the award yesterday, so congrats to Daniel Brunskill on receiving the Good Guy Award. The Eddie George Award is what it's named after. But Daniel Brunskill downgraded to not practicing after limited. Then Jalen Duncan, he was downgraded to not practicing after limited on Wednesday. Aaron Brewer was limited. Like, Brad, I'm concerned now at the point, like, who is on the line on Sunday? If these guys, and Daniel Brunskill has battled through many injuries this year. I believe he'll find a way to get out there. But I'm telling you, this left tackle position, I think it's going to be Andre Dillard who starts.
What difference does it make?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying you can't afford to put Levis back there.
Well, you can also cater to what you have by personnel, what you run offensively.
Sure.
You don't have the line to sit there and drop back in a 7-10 step drop and try and air this thing out, letting routes develop over 4 or 5 seconds, because it's not going to be the case. Keep the short to intermediate stuff, commit to the run, hopefully that they can create enough lanes, enough avenues to get positive yards and not be, just dropped in the backfield every single time. It might seem like beating your head up against the wall, but then subsequently you're not putting anybody at risk. Mm-hmm. No one can tee off on the quarterback nowadays, so once the ball's out of his hands, he's safe. So if it's 3-step drop, hitting the tight ends with regularity, some screen plays, if that's part of the passing element this week, then do that. Don't sit there and think that you're going to have a nice, clean pocket for any one of these quarterbacks to work with consistently. DeAndre might get a little frustrated, but then again, he lives in the slot. He lives in the underneath stuff. The deep threats might not be there. Maybe even a jumbo package or two, 12 personnel, like Coach Mack's always talking about, a couple of tight ends on the field, giving them the element of running. But then you can pass from those elements too. We got some good pass catchers. Chig Okonkwo has done a great job making himself available and necessary.
He's on the up and up.
But all I'm saying is that just understand your degree of difficulty. By personnel, you just don't have it to run a style of offense that will put the quarterback or anybody else in harm's way. So, commit to 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It might not be sexy, but guess what? They'll get out of this one healthy, because you already mentioned the guys that are not healthy, that are not practicing, and that's the part of the season that we're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. But on a team that's been dealing with injury, a team that's been dealing with inconsistencies up front, you just got to understand what the reality is and just kind of stay in that world.
Absolutely. And UW, I'm sorry, I've got to bring this up. In the chat says, who's the winner of the Bad Guy of the Year award? That will stay under wraps, UW. That will stay under wraps. Coming up, we're going to switch gears. The Volunteers have had some momentum headed into the offseason with a big win in the Citrus Bowl. We'll check in with Brent Hubbs of Volquest. That is next. We'll ask just how big the offseason is for Josh Heupel and company. It's RKW on 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back into RKW on this fine Friday. Kayla Anderson, Brad Hopkins. And we're welcoming in our good friend that joins us every Fridays to talk Vols. He knows it all. It's Brent Hubbs of Volquest. Brent, how are you doing? And did you make it back safely from Orlando?
Yeah, we did. We did just fine rolling back through on Monday night we got about halfway, and Tuesday we rolled the rest of the way back in. So life was good. I sort of felt like Morgan Freeman and Driving Miss Daisy getting Austin back. So we did okay, Kayla. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, because when we had Austin on earlier this week, he did allude to the fact that you were driving, and you know what? You got him back safely. That's all that matters. So
Yeah, I did. I had a nice Afghan to lay over his lap, and he could sit right back real comfortably as I drove him back home. That's my role in this team concept, is just to make sure Austin gets to and from.
Exactly. You're the real rock star, Brent.
There you go.
What a time down there, though, in terms of that game, the Citrus Bowl and Nico Iamaleava. How, I don't think you were shocked by any means, but how impressed were you with his performance?
Well, it wasn't about some wow throws or anything. And he had a couple of really nice throws, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like you walked out of there and you went, holy, this guy's got a rocket, or this guy's, arm. It wasn't about the physical part of it for me. It was more about the mental side of it. And the fact that he managed the game the way that he did. He never had to call a timeout because there was confusion. But they play fast, so delay games aren't usually a possibility anyway. But he was never in danger of anything like that. No pre-snap penalties. He took care of the football. It's the mental side of things that I was most impressed with, just with the way that he took care of things and managed the game. As a guy who looked like he had played a lot more than 54 snaps coming into that game. So I think that's the foundation and the starting point that Tennessee fans should be excited about moving into 24. He's obviously got a lot of physical skills. Those are pretty evident. He can run, he can do different things, but just the management of the game from the mental side of it is what stuck out to me the most.
There's excitement from fans, that's clear, but for this program in particular, the coaches, the players, how much momentum does that give headed into the offseason? And right now, I believe this is their probably longest break, right?
Yeah, it is their longest break. School doesn't start at Tennessee until the 22nd, so guys will come back in the weekend of the 19th. So they some left Monday after the game, and some left Tuesday morning after the game, and scattered back to their homes to spend a little time away from the game and away from campus, and then they'll come back and get started. I think it gives them momentum. I think it gives them a good bit of momentum because they're bringing some parts back around to help Nico. When you look at, Cooper Mays and John Campbell and Javante Spraggins and some of the guys that they have up front, Jackson Lampley, who started the last two games, and then you look at what they're bringing back on the defensive line and the defensive interior in particular, grown men. They're not breaking in a bunch of newcomers up there next year. So there's a lot of things to be excited about to go around Nico. Now they've got to get some receivers to emerge and to play more explosive than what they played. But, you walked out of that game and you felt like, hey, they've got a lot to build and to work with heading into 24. That's not going to be a, quote, rebuilding season for this program. And the way Nico played, you feel like, hey, they can step in and do some things. Now, the top of the schedule next year is very challenging because they're on the road early. But if you can find a way to get through that early part of that schedule, you put yourself in a great situation next season.
Brent, was this a real litmus test, though, for who the Vols actually could be in 2024, going up against an Iowa team that we knew who they were defensively, and we knew that was going to be a challenge for a young quarterback, but offensively, they really weren't built for coming back from behind. They were dealing with a backup quarterback and whatnot. So give us your true thoughts about who the Vols could be, not comparatively speaking to what they faced in the Citrus Bowl.
Well, I think that's a great point, Brad. And I think that you learned from a year ago with the Clemson game that, yeah, there's lots of things to, some things to be excited about. But you also have to say, you know what, that's a bit of a one-off too, because it's just one game. You don't take and run with that, and suddenly Nico's in the Heisman race, and suddenly this defense is elite and going to shut everybody down. I mean, they played schematically some stuff defensively against Iowa that they won't play. They may not play a snap of next year because nobody plays the way Iowa plays. I mean, Tennessee was in a ton of single safety high looks. They walked Jalen McCullough, the veteran safety, to the line of scrimmage basically and loaded the box. That was a between the, in the box type game for your linebackers. So you got to look at it from the standpoint of big picture of what they're bringing back on defense that you feel like they can build off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the back end, in the secondary, you also have to keep in mind, hey, weren't truly tested because you weren't worried about them throwing it over your head. They obviously couldn't throw the football effectively, whether they were ahead or behind. So there's some questions that they have to answer. I mean, that, and that's the one challenging thing about bowl games that you look at. I mean, look at Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss was everybody's darling after beating Penn State. Everybody's had them as a lock for a playoff team and maybe even being in Atlanta for the SEC championship game next year. And then they lose Judkins yesterday to the transfer portal, and who knows what they do this offseason. So I think you have to be careful about taking too much from one game at the end of a season with a bunch of newcomers in there and saying, this is who they are next year. I think what you could take about Tennessee is you don't have a quarterback question going into this offseason. This is Nico's team. Now, he's got to grow and get better, but that question's been resolved. And in football at any level, if a team has their quarterback situation answered in the offseason, then that elevates the status of that football team going into the next year.
Brent, you just mentioned that this is Nico's team. I think it may have been Nico's team well before Joe Milton alleged to have said, hey, listen, I'm going to go ahead and get myself ready for the next level. I thought it was interesting that Josh Heupel was answering that question as to when the decision was made to start Nico. Are you buying the fact that it was maybe Joe's decision, or was it public pressure that they were succumbing to?
No, I don't think it was public pressure. I think that that's not Joe, that's not Josh Heupel, and that's not how they work. I think Joe, had some conversations with Tennessee where he was a little bit unsure, and some of Joe's people around him said, hey, it might not be a bad thing to focus on the draft. And I don't know that Tennessee clamored and begged for Joe to start the game. Hey, don't do that. I think they were okay with whatever Joe decided. And when Joe decided that he wasn't going to play, Tennessee was perfectly fine with it becoming Nico time. But I don't think it was a situation where Tennessee went to Joe and said, hey, everybody's wanting to see Nico internally and externally. We need you to sit out. I don't think that was the case at all. I think Joe made this decision sometime the week before Christmas. But I think he was already leaning that way, and I think Tennessee had a feeling of that because he was around the team, doing some stuff, but Joe was letting Nico do more and more, in some volunteer work, and Nico was taking more and more first-team reps. And Joe wanted to help Nico the way that Hendon Hooker helped him last year, because I think Joe saw that as, hey, it's time for them to move on and me to move on. I mean, he obviously didn't go work on draft stuff while in Orlando last week because he was around the team the whole time. But he was around the team happy, and he was around the team to try to help Nico in any way that he could.
Brent Hubbs of Volquest joining us this morning on RKW. As exciting as Nico is on the offensive side of the ball, Brent, James Pierce Jr. is exciting on the defensive side. And what a special season. 10 sacks, 14 and a half tackles for loss, 16 QB hits. Brent, just how important is this for this defense to have a guy like this coming into next season and what he could possibly do again for this team?
Brad, you want to answer that one? You may have a feeling on that one better than anybody else. I mean, elite edge guys, as much as we talk about quarterbacks and how that changes the outlook of a team, the NFL is paying, and quite frankly, college football is paying with NIL stuff now, paying quarterbacks, paying guys who can protect the quarterback off the edge, and guys who can get to the quarterback. And James Pierce is a unique guy. I said weeks ago, a couple of months ago on our podcast, he's got a little Micah Parsons in him. He kind of reminds me a little bit of some things. I'm not saying he's Micah Parsons, but he's a guy that he could be in the A-gap, he could be on the edge, he could play in space. You can do some different things with him. I'm anxious to see him at another 5 to 10 pounds heavier with more muscle. He has elite talent, elite skill set that he's going to have to make sure he stays completely focused, because all people are going to talk about this offseason is how much money he's getting ready to make, and how high he's going to go in the draft, and the mock drafts are going to come out there. If he can stay locked in like he was this past offseason to make a jump, now it won't be as big as last season to this season, but if he can make another jump, then the NFL, who's already foaming at the mouth for him, is going to fall in love with him even more. Right, Brad?
Absolutely.
Brent, when it comes to a guy that has been there, has been a leader in that secondary, obviously going to miss that leadership in safety, Jalen McCullough. He broke the program's all-time starts record at 51 in that game in the Citrus Bowl. What are they losing in terms of a leader in that back end there, the defense?
Well, he's a guy who's seen everything. You don't play in 60 college football games and not see basically everything everybody has to offer. 51 starts, as you mentioned. The other thing, too, is, he has a great love for the University of Tennessee. He's got some limitations athletically. He does. He's not the fleetest of foot, and that shows up in the open field at times, which is why he's been criticized by a lot of people, including myself, because I think Tennessee can be more athletic back there. I think they'll be more athletic back there next year when you look at some of the changes that are going to take place in personnel. But he's a guy who has great passion for Tennessee. It means the world to him to get to play for Tennessee, and he's a guy with a ton of experience who knows what teams are doing. He's a smart football player. That's an area back there where, again, I think they're going to be more athletic, but they're going to be short on experience. They're going to have to grow in a hurry when you look at the early season schedule. NC State is a team that lost almost 24 guys to the transfer portal. You think, well, they're not going to be real good. Well, they went and got Grayson McCall at quarterback from Coastal Carolina. They're going to get Noah Rogers, it sounds like, or they've just gotten Noah Rogers, I should say, from Ohio State, wide receiver from over there, who's got a world of talent. Didn't get to play at Ohio State year one and got impatient. But he's a guy with a lot of talent to go with McCall. They brought in a running back. They're going to be a lot different offensively than you thought they were going to be a month ago. And so those young secondary guys, when you talk about playing in a neutral site game in Charlotte against NC State, and then going to Oklahoma and taking on a hot phenom quarterback in Jackson Arnold next year, that group's got to grow up in a hurry in the back end. Again, I think they're going to be more talented and more athletic, but they're just going to be short on experience.
Brew McCoy, Brent, obviously we know that he suffered the season-ending and possibly career-threatening ankle dislocation. He just said he's coming back for another year. And that was after maybe talking to people around maybe not the program, but around the NFL as to what his potential could be playing in the league. So, what are your thoughts about him returning and possibly being, a good target for the second-year player, Nico?
Well, he and Nico have great chemistry. They're both from California. They've developed a good relationship on and off the field. Nico has certainly wanted him back and stated that publicly, that he wanted him back because he's a veteran presence for Nico. He's a veteran presence in a wide receiver room that's got some talent. It's got an influx of some new talent, but again, they're young. Nico's a pro every day, on and off the field. He carries himself as a pro. Brew carries himself as a pro. And Brew, he loves being at Tennessee. He's had a great experience at Tennessee. This was not his plan. His plan was to go to the league before the injury. But after the injury and the surgery and the plate and screws, obviously that's a long rehab. He's ahead of schedule. Rehab, he says, is going well. But he just wasn't going to be in a position where he could show anything to NFL scouts. And I just think when you talk about that position in the NFL, it's just hard to get somebody to take a chance on you at a decent spot in the draft when you're coming off an injury and you have to prove you got your back from a running standpoint with speed and quickness, and you can't really do that in any pre-draft work. So I just think that the injury is forcing him to return, which he's okay with because, again, he likes it at Tennessee and he's very comfortable with Nico and knows that he's going to have a chance to be really productive. I think this would have been a different conversation if Tennessee were going into the offseason and you didn't know where they were at quarterback. They were either bringing in a transfer or it was a newcomer, and you just weren't sure. But Brew knows exactly what he's going to get from the quarterback position in this offense with him back in it, and I think he was comfortable with that, knowing that he's got to prove to the NFL that he's healthy.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, last thing for me, Brent, I was down in Orlando on Wednesday watching the Under Armour All-American Bowl.
Yeah.
Got to see Mike Matthew, got to see Jordan Ross, a couple of guys that are on the Vols' radar. Any chance that we can get Dominic McKinley, the big old tackle that committed to LSU?
Well, LSU cleaned house on the defensive side of the ball, with their coaching staff. And Matt House was let go, and basically Brian Kelly heading into year 3 has absolutely blown up that side from a coaching staff standpoint. So if you're Tennessee, you're making those phone calls, and you're doing everything you can to get McKinley to take that visit that he was scheduled to take on January the 20th. The longer LSU goes without hiring someone, I think the greater the chances there are that you can get him on campus for a visit. But, we'll see. I mean, LSU's about 90 minutes from home. Tennessee's obviously multiple hours from the house. But, he committed to A&M, lost his defensive line coach that was going to coach him. He committed to LSU, lost his defensive line that was going to coach him. And Tennessee's sitting there with a veteran in Rodney Garner and a defensive staff of veterans going, hey, we're still here. We're not going anywhere. So why don't you come take a look at us? We got a lot of stability. So, for that thing to get real, Brad, they got to get him on campus for that visit and later this month. If that happens, then, I think they're definitely going to be a factor and can be in it. But until he visits, I think that's still a long shot right now.
Brent Hubbs of Volquest joins us every Friday, bringing us the best insight when it comes to the Tennessee Volunteers. Brad and Brent, the Bees here today. Brent, we appreciate you and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Brent.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate y'all. Have a great day.
You too. And yes, LSU did overhaul the staff on the defensive side. If you were wondering, that was actually a thing here. They needed to do it. Well, coming up next, we continue a little college football talk. ESPN and the NCAA, they have combined to make a big deal when it comes to the college championships. We'll get into the details of that. That's coming up next when we wrap up Hour 2 here on Ramon, Kayla, and Will, 104.5 The Zone. Hey, it's Kayla Anderson for the Wang Vision Institute. Obviously doing everything when it comes to eye care, eye health. They do it the right way. I went in there a few months ago, got my whole eye care checked out. I had not actually been to an eye doctor in years. And they do it so nicely because I get a little scared when I go into those situations, not knowing what my eyes are going to be doing in terms of health in the years to come. But everything was good and they were first class. And not only do they offer eye care there, they actually offer things for the skin as well. Intense pulse light treatments, if you don't know what it is, actually a great non-invasive treatment, photofacial treatment that actually rejuvenates the skin. Maybe you've had sun damage and you're seeing those dark spots as you get older. These treatments actually even out the skin texture as well as hyperpigmentation. So for more on IPL treatments, along with all the other services at Wang Vision Institute, visit wangvisioninstitute.com today. The IPL treatments, they create those long-lasting results. Procedure actually takes just 20 to 30 minutes. You're out the door. No worries. You can go do whatever you want for the rest of the day. So to learn more and also to get a free consultation when it comes to your eyes, you can visit them. You can RSVP at 6:45 every Tuesday. They do a free consultation, like I mentioned. It's wangvisioninstitute.com. Your skin and eyes will thank you for the long-lasting results. Welcome back into RKW on this Friday morning. All bobbing our heads in studio here. It's the kind of vibes we want, right? Headed into the weekend. Kayla Anderson, Brad Hopkins, Robert Walsh.
You a
doing it
Dr.
all.
John fan?
I'm always a Dr. John
Look at
fan,
that.
baby. Come on now.
The best thing about you
knows
never
the
know a
voice.
single word
You
that he's
never
going to
know.
say.
You never know. Right place.
But it must
Right
have been the
away.
wrong time.
It does get you going, though.
This is too old for you two in the studio.
Well, I
here,
still
you youngsters.
appreciate
I
classic
got some old ass
music.
parents, Brad.
Do you? Hey, wait, how old are your parents, Bert?
Yeah, right.
Old as hell. I don't know.
Are you
No, hold on a
They-
second.
they-
Time out, because old as
I
hell
know,
could be
what
my
is-
age.
I don't
We're
know.
talking about old as hell.
They're still scratching on the walls to show every year. Oh, add another strike to the wall, Martha. You know?
Have you stand next to the refrigerator? Robert's, he's 6 feet tall now. Look at him. Growing.
I ain't even lying. There are height measurements on our daggum wall at the house.
Yeah. I'm like, when does that stop? Because my parents or my grandparents used to do that. I'm like, when does that actually stop for kids that they measure their height?
My parents never did it. They were
No?
just, they didn't, they didn't care.
It's so funny. But my grandma and grandpa did it.
They knew you were going to be a large
Yeah.
individual. They're like, we cannot be heighting this dude
You know,
every year, man.
Au contraire, mon frere, Bert. I remember my grandfather telling me, we thought you were going to be a squatty little rascal. I did hit a growth spurt when I was in high school. Matter of fact, I grew some in college, Kayla.
Did you really?
Sure did.
Wait, and
Yeah.
your grandpa told you this?
My grandfather did, because I was like 5'7" or something like that in 6th or 7th grade, So if
Damn,
I was going to be a
Grandpa?
squatty little rascal. And he ended up saying that to me after I started growing a little bit.
Of course.
He didn't feel bad telling me that they thought I was going to be a shrimp.
Well, Papa's never felt bad about saying anything.
Yeah.
I mean, me being there's two of us girls and, both sides, the cousins. And both grandma and grandpa my both grandpas on both sides were pretty much just like straightforward with everything.
That's what grandparents
You
are.
know? And
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
But you're not a short lady, though, Kayla.
No, I'm not. But you get some bullying in school when you're
Stop, not
when
you.
you're real skinny. And I told Bert and company I was called Spider Legs growing up, so that was fun. I don't wear shorts to this day for that reason. We all had those moments, folks. We all had those moments. Well, speaking of, before we get to the ESPN NCAA teaming up for a big thing in terms of championships, I wanted to say this, shout out to the Vandy women, because the Vandy women right now, Shea Ralph is doing an incredible job over there. They are 14-1 to start the season. They just started SEC play and won their opener last night against Mississippi State. I just wanted to give credit where credit is due, because I think there's a lot of rebuilding there within Vanderbilt athletics, whether that be on the football side, the men's program, a little down right now. But shout out to Shea Ralph and company, because those women are doing some work.
That should roll right into your next topic, which is ESPN and obviously the NCAA pouring more
Absolutely.
money into championship situations, allowing sports and players like the one you just mentioned
No,
to get more exposure.
you're exactly right. And that is a perfect segue into that, because the ESPN and NCAA, they've announced a new 8-year TV rights deal for the NCAA championships. That's going to run from 2024 through 2031-32. I can't even believe I'm saying that right now, 2031. But the agreement covers over 40 championships across the NCAA, not only Division I, Brad, Division I, II, and III levels, and will feature multiple national championship contests being broadcast on ABC. And the deal is worth $115 million per year for $920 million across all 8 years.
Yeah, that's almost double what it was the previously existing deal, which was $500 million over 12 years. We get that, but you can also see now where the month of December, January, especially when people are really glued to their TVs watching bowl games from December 15th on, that sports sells. Not a lot of people are working. So you see those situations where programs are taking that extra change to get that weight room and bolster themselves up a little bit in recruiting, for the NIL discussion. Having those games televised and having more programming, it behooves everybody, because TV is starving for programming. I've been watching cornhole and all kinds of other stuff. Why not have a championship for the women's basketball be featured, or some tournament, that now has some dollars tied to it that these schools can now tap into. It makes sense.
And we've seen incredible growth on the women's side in terms of sports lately. Women's basketball in the past 3 years has grown immensely. The popularity of it. I mean, you go look at Iowa right now, and like those women's basketball games, they're full. South Carolina, those women's basketball games to the brim.
That's to see Caitlin though in Iowa.
It is. But that is such a cool thing, because if she can do it, and then they get more recruits in to kind of carry on that program's success, you're going to continue to fill that. And Caitlin's a lifetime player, right? But there are always people coming in that could be the next big thing. And they've done it at South Carolina. They're doing it now at LSU, right? So you're seeing more eyes on the women's game because they've got these figures that are creating such positive buzz and excitement for the game. And you can say it about softball too. So this is giving opportunities again to see this more on the main stage.
Yeah, featuring those athletes, because you're right. Those are the, I think, the kind of stars that then bring star power to a program that make other kids want to go and be those athletes. And if you can see them on television with more consistency, then it's saying, hey, look, Iowa's destination spot, LSU's a destination spot. Why? Because they're competitive programs, but also they feature players that make them mentionable on the national stage.
Absolutely. 2 hours down and 2 more to go, and we're going to jump back into some Titans talk. Coming up at 8:20, Nate Washington, former Titans legend there, and one of the best grabs that we've ever seen in a game. I'm going to ask him about that. He's going to join us again to talk some Titans. But first, we're going to get into what reasons do certain Titans players have to play, their best game on Sunday. Money comes into play at the end of the year, Brad. We're going to get into some of those incentives that some of these guys are working to get. That's coming up next in hour 3 of RKW here on 104.5 The Zone.
Life is busy. We could all use some extra time in our day, which is exactly why Two Rivers Ford offers mobile service. We'll bring the service to your driveway at no additional charge. Oil changes, brakes, batteries, the certified technicians at Two Rivers will perform basic maintenance on your vehicle wherever you are, so you'll have more time for moments like this. Schedule your mobile service appointment by scanning the QR code or calling
What's going on? Just a hair before 8 o'clock from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Robert Walsh. Some good news on the Titans injury report as Will Levis was back at practice, but one step forward, two steps back for the Titans offense as guard Daniel Brunskill and tackle Jalen Duncan both missed practice after being limited on Wednesday. Jacksonville pretty much stays the same as wide receivers Zay Jones and Christian Kirk get back to work in facilities, limited in practice. Trevor Lawrence also limited again, but did throw during the team's open practice portion, dealing with a shoulder and a finger injury on opposite sides of his body. Jacksonville can clinch the AFC South with a win over the Titans on Sunday. And in Baltimore, four-time Pro Bowl running back Dalvin Cook signing with the Baltimore Ravens practice squad after successfully passing through waivers yesterday. Baltimore in need of some running back depth after injuries at the position to J.K. Dobbins and Keaton Mitchell left the Ravens with a bare cupboard at running back. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once from your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Welcome into a Friday edition of Ramon, Kayla, and Will. Welcome into wherever you're listening here in Middle Tennessee or around the country, getting you into the weekend in style. Of course, always brewed up by our good friends at 8th and Roast. They've got 4 locations now. You got to try them out. Best coffee, best pastries, whatever you're looking for, they have it. They've got one on 8th Avenue, Charlotte, over here in Midtown, 2 in the airport. Check them out, 8th and Roast Coffee, cultivating community by the cup. You can also find your favorite retail bag in every Kroger, Publix, and Whole Foods, too. It's Kayla Anderson, Brad Hopkins in today for Ramon Foster. Will Bowling has the day off. Robert Walsh behind the glass. And on Friday, y'all, we act like it. Charles Jones. For all the workers that work 9 to 5. If you want to party, we're going to party. Well, actually, it's New Year's. I feel like everybody's partied out. Like, this is the weekend that everybody starts to take a break, right?
You're right.
Are you a New Year's Eve guy?
So my middle son had a New Year's Eve party that we went to at his house. It was pretty cool.
Oh, nice. Here in Nashville?
Yeah.
Okay.
Had a lot of his coworkers there and whatnot. It was pretty fun, but we left early. My wife and I watched the music note drop along with Leonard Skinner's performances.
That's a national broadcast now on CBS.
Absolutely, and rightfully so. There was a lot of people that were freezing their butts off downtown last weekend, but I can't say that there's been a couple of New Year's where I brought it in sleeping. You know what I mean?
Me too.
It is what it is. I think I had to work the next day. When the ball drops or the note drops and then you got to work in the morning, it's like, you go, all right, we saw the thing drop and I'm in bed by 12:01.
Right.
Yeah.
Cheers, champagne, chug
exactly.
it.
Give me a kiss.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce? I think he said, I love you.
Oh, my God. What, are they going to get married next week?
I don't know, but they did make mention of the fact that they were smooching.
It's moving fast.
Yeah.
It's moving fast.
It's too fast.
I don't know what to think about it, because it's kind of fun to see, but then it's like it's a lot too. And in the world of entertainment, I'm never really convinced that it's real. I think it is, but it's hard to, with this situation, it just came so suddenly in terms of the relationship. She's at every game. Like, this is a woman who has been on tour for years, and we just see like so many things when she's on tour and she's traveling all the time. Like, she's been almost to every game of his, which is kind of incredible. And that's what makes me think, okay, well, I guess this is really real, because she's taking the time out of her schedule the independent woman she's been in terms of an entertainment person, to go and, be there for her guy.
That's why she's the jinx.
I guess so.
That's why she's the jinx. She changed the chemistry. Instead of hanging out, making commercials with Patrick Mahomes, he's on flights to Brazil to watch her perform and stuff like that. I'm telling you, her sitting up in the stands and people paying attention more to her presence or not there or not being there, that definitely has changed some of the things that have gone on. I'm telling you, that concert that she did at Arrowhead, that was the beginning of the end for the run of the Kansas City Chiefs. And they're going to circle back to this and say that was a reason. Watch. Just watch.
I'm sure that fans here in Tennessee are fine with that. They're absolutely fine with that. They say, go on, Taylor, with your bad self, putting the jinx on the Kansas City Chiefs. Speaking of Kansas City, some of the other, teams in the NFL who obviously will be making playoff runs, the Titans, not that team, right? Their season comes to an end this Sunday. So I always love the fact when these schedules come out and it's like, okay, what do we have to look forward to next year? Who are the juggernauts that come into Nissan Stadium? Where do you go on the road? Now, you don't get the dates yet. That will come later in May. But the NFL has released the Titans' 2024 regular season opponents. So I'm going to go through these quickly and then just ask you who are you kind of looking forward to facing. I'm curious as the F&M Bank chat too what they have to say about this. But the 2024 home opponents for the Titans next year, in no particular order: Houston, Texas, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars. They've got the New England Patriots at home. What will that look like in terms of head coach? The New York Jets, the Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings, and the Cincinnati Bengals. On the road for the Titans next season, the Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars. Then they go to Buffalo. They go to Miami, Chicago, Detroit. Could that be a Thanksgiving game? Los Angeles Chargers, and the Washington Commanders.
So the AFC East and the NFC North are who we've rotated to play this year. How do you feel about playing against those divisions is how it kind of wraps up too. Of course, the NFC East has been kind of a juggernaut with the Bills, the resurgence of the Dolphins, seeing the Cheetah and Tua. It's not going to be an easy stretch by any situation. But then, of course, you've got kind of a developing NFC North. Not sure what Kirk Cousins' future is going to be up in Minnesota.
Fair.
If you like Jordan Love, him replacing Aaron Rodgers as the guy saying they got a future. But then again, we also can see the very first pick of the draft in Chicago. Being featured against this defense too. So there's going to be a lot mentioned around that game. So it'll be interesting to see how the Titans will land as far as the roster that they field to be in some of these matchups that we'll see, especially the nationally televised games.
Yeah, and seeing what that primetime schedule will look like next season.
That's what I meant, primetime.
Yeah,
they're all on TV. But
yeah, and obviously this year not much of that. I mean, they had the Monday night game, speaking of the Dolphins, in Miami, which that was just, it's crazy to think that was the season. I go back and I'm like, they won that game.
Yeah.
Against a Dolphins team that, like you've said, has been more on the up and up than anything.
No. That's not how the national media views it. They didn't view the Titans as beating.
They think of it as the other way.
Dolphins won.
Yes.
Or Dolphins lost. Wasn't the Titans win, it was a Dolphins loss.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to, so the Detroit Lions, I love this matchup. This will be on the road next year with a Mike Vrabel and obviously what they have in Dan Campbell. They're not the same person. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of similarities with those two head coaches, just the physicality they demand with their teams. I'm looking forward to that matchup because hopefully the Titans have their stuff a little bit more headed in the right direction at that point. They've got some guys on the roster, some more talent, but that's cool if that's maybe even a Thanksgiving game.
So you like the former player head coach element to it all?
That's not the main thing, but I do in that particular matchup because of those two personalities.
But you can only say that about a guy that has established his identity on the football field. You can't look at Brandon Staley and be like,
no, you can't. Right.
Hey, this guy's gonna bring an attitude. Who cares? But you ain't never played. You know what I'm saying? But if you talking about two dudes that would have covered each other back in the day, think about that. If Mike Vrabel and Dan Campbell were eligible players, Mike, being a defensive end, would have had to cover the former tight end Dan Campbell, right?
Yeah.
Or Dan would have had to block him. So essentially, they would have seen each other on the football field, and having these two identities now being leaders of a team trying to teach and develop young, players to be like they once were on the gridiron, man. That does say something.
Yeah.
Throw Antonio Pierce in the mix. If he's a head coach in Las Vegas, you do like those guys that brought an attitude and that players just can't, you can't bully a dude that's been on the football field. You can't. It'll totally be interesting to see also the New England game if, in fact, we still have Mike Vrabel or if he has gone back to where he is a Hall of Famer.
That was the one that I was going to say at home that I'm looking most forward to. And look, when I see the Green Bay Packers on the schedule for home, you always wonder, like, how these fan bases travel. We've seen a lot of them in the past at Nissan Stadium. Titans fans have done a great job, though, in the past couple of years, really filling Nissan Stadium with two-tone blue. But when those strong fan bases travel, that's always, like, crazy to see, especially to what is a destination city in Nashville. But New England, man, I don't know what to expect out of that team next year. Who will their head coach be? Will it be Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi, or will they have a completely different quarterback there? To me, like, that's a complete reboot because you're considering the fact that you're not going to have Bill Belichick there.
Yeah. When you have two quarterbacks, you have none.
Yeah.
They kept rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. It didn't matter. That thing was going down. But I think maybe the only thing that wouldn't work in Mike Vrabel's favor, if in fact he were just considering, and I think that they'd probably have to pay a king's ransom to get him interested in going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would be the fact that they need somebody that can develop the offense. And it can't be a defensive mind, which means that Mike is going to have to hire somebody, that speaks quarterback, that speaks young player, that speaks developing an offense on the side of the football he doesn't necessarily have favor in. Now, of course, we know that he has his influence. He's going to, have his say on a couple of influential things as the style of offense. But for the most part, who he hires to basically build the offense is going to be somebody that he's going to have to put his chips into the table too. Look, I got to bring in the next brilliant mind offensively to kind of get these guys moving in the right direction because we saw how Bill Belichick did it, hiring Matt Patricia and his son to kind of be offensive coordinators, and that thing just kind of really derailed a lot of development for players like Mac Jones. So they don't want to repeat those same sins that they have over the past couple of years.
And in my opinion, too, and I know there's a love affair in terms of Robert Kraft and, Mike Vrabel, he did some incredible things there. I mean, inducted to the Ring of Honor this past season. But you're looking at a New England Patriots team, too, if you're Mike Vrabel and if any of these rumors are true, if there's anything to these rumors and there are thoughts of him going back to New England, that's an even tougher job at this point. Because I think they're having to reboot that entire organization in terms of the actual product on the field. Like, they don't even have a quarterback. At least here in Tennessee, you're pretty sure that Will Levis is your quarterback.
So you're saying right now that the Titans situation is better than the Patriots situation?
I think it's a little better. And I know it's a different market, and I know that's a bigger market. But sometimes a market where there's not as much attention on you all the time, sometimes that's a better thing.
You're speaking positivity about a 5-win season.
Yeah. But
You're saying that it's, yeah?
I'm saying if he went to the Patriots, not anywhere else. I'm saying Patriots. You think that's really a better job? So.
I see more upside here. Yeah, I see more upside in the fact that we have more established players. D-Hop will be back. You got a young quarterback in Will Levis that has brought some excitement to an offense. Shoot, even the King could see that the possibilities of sticking around. And we re-sign him. I don't know. I think that there's a lot more here to be excited about than up in New England at this point.
I agree. And you know what? We'll ask our friend Nate Washington. We'll ask him that question. He joins the show. That's coming up next on RKW here on 104.5 The Zone. I mean, what a perfect song to bring in one of the best, right?
Oh, so you saying this would be Nate's theme music?
Well, I hope so. Maybe the newer one. This is original, right? Robert Walsh?
Sounds like an instrumental.
Yeah, well, this
Yeah.
is the instrumental, but yeah, it's Warren G. Regulate.
Oh, so
Regulators!
this is one of my favorite songs.
Mount up.
Man, we'll have to ask this guy himself. Nate Washington, former Titans wide receiver, joining us now. Would this be one of your intros?
Hey, good morning, guys.
What's up?
I could totally see you in a long leather trench coat or in a fedora or something like that, just sliding in, Nate. No, not to this song.
Yeah, no, not to this song, man. But I often get ties with Nate, to the late great Nate Dogg, man. It's a tremendous honor, but definitely not me. I'm not gonna be singing over no hook for you.
We are honored to be joined by you this morning. I'm going to start this off because we were talking to Titans Radio's Rhett Bryan, executive producer over there this week, and he was talking about you and on the all-time great list in terms of wide receivers, and he said specifically he remembers this one catch. September 23rd, 2012, you caught the ball over Lions' Jacob Lacey, taking it 71 yards for the touchdown. Obviously, you got to go and watch the actual catch, but is that one of the favorites in your career?
Oh yeah, definitely. I actually think it may be number one. It's ironic because the only other catch that I had is the key word, is against Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, I made a huge catch, jumped up in the air, and was coming down. As soon as I was coming down, good old Troy Polamalu knocked it out of my hand. And that would probably have been the only play to trump it. But, yeah, the catch against the Lions probably would be my most recognized and the one that, a lot of the fans are reminisce over often. So that would probably be number one on my list.
We've been talking a lot this morning, if it is indeed Derrick Henry's final game in two-tone blue, like what favorite memories fans had or just in terms of his career in general here in Tennessee. Nate, is it crazy to think this might be his last go-round here? And if so, what are you going to remember the most about King Henry?
Unfortunately, time and, as they say, father time, it's undefeated. All things come to an end at some point. I'm not sure if this is his last go-around with the Titans, but if it is, it's not surprising to me personally because, especially with, when you look at the position of running back in the league, it's not one of those positions where guys last, 8, 9, 10 years, unfortunately. It's an anomaly for guys to get that far along in their career and still be viewed as a pure asset for these teams. So for Derrick to do what he's done over the duration of time that he's done, it's incredible as a personal feat. The guy has been knocking on 2,000 yards, it seems like, every other season, and it has been able to reach that milestone in one of those seasons. So, it'll definitely be a memorable moment, not only for the fan base, but I'm sure for him as well. I can recall, when it was just inevitable to know that my time with the Titans was coming to the end. And, it was going to be time for me to either A, hang up the cleats or move on. And, it was hard for me personally. I had a lot of connection in Nashville. I had built a lot of friends. I, loved a lot of the community, and the community loved me. So a lot of that, was tied to a personal connection. So I'm sure it'll be hard for him. It'll be hard for the fan base. But, I think it's important also to go out with a bang, not to sulk, not to, reminisce or dwell on, the past or anything that's in the imminent future. And just try to do the best you can to close out this game on the standard that he wants to close it out on. I think ultimately, this is a guy that will forever be in the ring of honor of running backs for this organization, from Earl Campbell to Eddie to CJ and now the great Derrick Henry. I think this organization has done, an outstanding job of building a legacy of running backs here, and I'm sure he's glad to be a part of that. So it's a matter of honoring him and him honoring the fans on his way out, if that is the case.
Nate, I'm interested to get your perspective as a receiver that actually was on a roster that featured another great running back in Chris Johnson. You knew that the receiving game wasn't necessarily the pivotal part of that offense, and maybe more of it did run through a guy that was as stylistic and pretty impressionable as Chris Johnson. Just your perspective of being a guy that either had to block on the edge or be some sort of coup de main to a guy that was pretty much the feature of the offense.
Man, well, honestly, it was tough for me personally, man, because man, I was a route runner. You know what I'm saying? I literally, I came from Pittsburgh where we were required to be physical and block, and I would always do my job. But 2, 3 rundowns out of 4 for me wasn't always ideal. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to rock early. I wanted to be able to touch the ball, but I knew a lot of times leading into some of those games, especially during his 2,000-yard season, that obviously Chris Johnson was going to be our number one option. As well do, this was something that, I finally come to a realization with the organization that that's how we were built as a team. So it wasn't about me having receptions or, touching the ball first and getting early looks so I can get in a groove, because I knew a part of our scheme and a part of what we did best and how we were built as an offense and as a team. I knew that, run game was going to be first, so I had to put anything aside about pass catching or any of that in my mind and just give my best effort in the block game and the run game and blocking and doing those things that, may not always get noticed, but it was important for me to, go and do my job, man. I hated being that guy once you look on film, a big run breaks out and maybe that DB from the backside or, a guy that you just kind of lackadaisical on end up making the play. And it's the worst feeling in the world, It's the worst feeling to see a guy break a 60-yard run and get tackled at the 5-yard line because it's your guy and you was just too lackadaisical or you didn't show enough effort or it didn't matter to you, So I never wanted to be that guy. I wanted to go out with pride as much as I possibly could and do my job to the best of my ability. And as you said, a lot of times my job was required to block for one of the greatest backs in our game, Chris Johnson, and that to this day makes me proud.
Yeah. George Pickens didn't care about his guy making a tackle, but either way, you mentioned your Pittsburgh days, your route running days as a Steeler. You got to really pretty much tip your hat to your career coming into the league in 2005 as an undrafted free agent to then, catch balls in an AFC championship game or two and pretty much make a name for yourself to get that free agency contract coming to Tennessee. What was that journey like?
Man, it was incredible. I tell a lot of people the best thing about my experience with that situation is the guys that I came into in that locker room my rookie year really helped me transition into understanding that it was a difference between a job and a career. I was so excited about the opportunity that I had leaving Tiffin University, getting in that locker room with those professional guys and being, in all honesty, a fan. Hines Ward, Ben Roethlisberger, Joey Porter, Jerome Bettis. I'm seeing these guys now on an everyday basis, whereas, just 6 months prior, I was on a campus of maybe 3,000 students. So it was a huge experience for me, a huge adjustment. But, as I stated, coming into that situation with my eyes wide open and my pen and pad ready to get autographs, those guys kind of reminded me like, hey, I know you're excited to be here. I know you're excited about the opportunity, but you must understand, dude, like you have a talent and this is not something that you need to take serious because, this is the way you can not only feed your family, but something that can help you retire and, live the rest of your days out. So, from day one, Jerome Bettis and Hines Ward, like I said, those veteran guys in that locker room made me understand that I wasn't just another guy on that roster, but an asset to that team, and something was in front of me that I could, that could really change my life. So it was a great opportunity for me, but it was also the luck of the draw to a sort, because I couldn't say that I would have had the same career if I would have went anywhere else first outside of Pittsburgh.
Nate Washington joining us this morning on RKW. Nate, I'm curious to get your perspective, because there has been a lot of talk, and this is what happens, obviously, when you have a losing season. You've got to put blame on someone, or, in terms of fans, like, you're going to find someone, right? Whether it be the quarterback or the head coach or the offensive line. And right now there is a lot kind of swirling around about Mike Vrabel. Is he happy here? Could he be on the move? I don't think that will happen. But do you feel, Nate, he's the right guy for the job moving forward?
Well, here's the thing. As a person, I definitely believe, Mike Vrabel is a great head coach. As I stated, I had the opportunity to play for him, with him, if you will, while he was coaching in Houston, and I was on that roster. And I had the opportunity to engage and interact with him on a daily basis. I've also interacted with him privately here now. It's been very rare, but privately, whether it's text, phone call here now since he's been the head coach with the Titans. And he's a very personable guy. I think, a lot of times head coaches can get into a phase where they just generalize their team and they just see guys, as a standard, and I'm not calling out anyone specific, but, generally a lot of these guys, coaches can get into a generalized standard of which they expect their team to look. And they don't see individual guys or the aid that these individual guys may need to understand that they are now professional football players. And there's only so many coaches that are going to be able to see guys individually. And I feel like Coach Vrabel is one of those guys. Now, schematically and, as far as scheme, as far as roster building, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if things will get better. Obviously, now we have a new GM in Rand. I'm looking forward to what he's able to do this next offseason. I don't know, structurally or organizational-wise, how much, Vrabel has even had influence over that in the past. So I'm not going to, knock him for, the inability to build a very competitive roster, in my opinion, is what's been lacking. So we'll see how those things pan out once this offseason comes. If, there is an influx of stronger roster opportunities, assets brought in, whether free agent, how this draft goes, and those things. Long story short to you, Caleb, I think he's a great guy, and I definitely think he deserves another opportunity. I think, a lot of times fans must also understand, although he may not be him, his whole life, his whole coaching mantra, even when he was in Houston, was built under one man, Bill Belichick. So he's not going to be the guy that comes up to the podium and clicks his heels and makes jokes and smiling all the time. He has a dry sense of humor. He has a very dry personality at times. And, it comes from a place, not, like I said, not only was Bill Belichick like that, but Billy O was like that as well, Billy O'Brien. He was very dry, very, could be very sarcastic, but in my opinion, a very cool dude. Like he was my type of guy, didn't get overly excited, always was even keel, understood that. And I take Coach Vrabel as the same. I know this is kind of a long-winded explanation, but I just think Coach Vrabel is in a position right now that he may be on the hot seat, but I don't think it's time to get rid of him. He has a new GM. We'll see what Rand does this offseason and the opportunity he gives Vrabel with the roster that he builds. And I think that's just up to Rand and his job, and it's up to Coach Vrabel to do his job and make sure that his staff is prepared for next season.
Yeah, no, great perspective there. A different perspective as we've heard so many different people and opinions on that. So, Nate, when it comes to one of those positions, though, that they're going to have to add to, I mean, there's a lot, but the wide receiver room, DeAndre Hopkins has been phenomenal, and there is no taking away from that, and he's expected to be back next season, obviously, but then you got Treylon Burks. I mean, I hate to keep, beating a dead horse in this situation, but he's just not been able to live up to anything in the last couple of years because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And in my eyes, I would think, Nate, that means you're not able to build off your play and get better because you're just not out there.
Mm-hmm. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Kayla. Here's the problem on both sides. Respectfully, Traylon may be a great guy. He may be one of the coolest guys that you'll ever met. This game is not built on being a good guy. This game is not built on being a cool guy. This game is about production. This game is about showing up on Sundays. This game is about durability. This game is about reliability. And none of those things, unfortunately, we've been able to get out of Traylon. For me, as you stated, whether you're able to make big plays or not, that happens. I've seen guys make heck of a plays. I've seen guys drop wide open balls, when it comes to receiving. So I understand that the plays are going to come regardless. But the biggest disappointment, I guess you could say, on my end is his availability. I know things happen, injuries happen that, just are you can't play through. I get it. I understand, if your leg's broke, obviously you can't run. If you got a concussion and your head swirling, obviously you can't even see straight. So how can you go out and block someone? I understand those things. But as a first-round draft pick, in my opinion, and I don't care what headlines this makes, Traylon Burks has not been a number one draft pick. I don't care how we got him as a number one draft pick. We could still have A.J. Brown right now. But if we had traded Traylon Burks in the first round, it doesn't matter. He has not lived up to that draft pick. Why? Not necessarily because he hasn't made enough plays, but because he hasn't been available. And that is a issue for me. I come and I do my best to not judge these young guys on the old school standard. I do my best, man. But it bothers me because the only season I went over 1,000 in my whole career, I played on a high ankle sprain for 9 out of those 16 games. I couldn't even walk during the week. Coach Munchak didn't even allow me to practice. I didn't practice for the whole week and only played in the games. And that was my only season going over 1,000 yards. So for me, it's like, okay, cool. These things are happening. But for me, I don't see the dog in Traylon. I don't see it. And I don't mean making a big catch, getting up, pointing down the field, celebrating. I'm talking about the carry of the dog, the I want the ball, the I am the man, that everything goes through me mentality. As I stated, I think it was on you guys' show at the beginning of the year, Hop was going to be Hop. I knew Hop was going to come in and be reliable. I knew Hop was going to come in and do his job. But as I stated then, Hop is a number 2 receiver right now in this point of his career. He is a supporting cast. He has done everything he's supposed to, and that's no disrespect to Hop. Hop knows how I feel about him. But this is the position that he's in his career right now. Imagine if Traylon would have been that number 1 option with the support that Hop's been providing this year. But he hasn't. Not only has he not been that number 1 option, he hasn't even shown up. And in my opinion, I haven't even seen the will to show up. I haven't seen the passion. I haven't seen the drive to go out there and be what you were supposed to be. So in my opinion, it's bigger than getting him for A.J. Brown. It's about him not living up to his expectation as being the number 1 draft pick and being there to play football. This guy has been out since day 1. He missed almost the whole offseason, his rookie year, due to injuries. He almost missed half of the year last year due to injuries. I don't know the number of games he's missed this year, but it's frustrating because, as I stated, this isn't about dropping passes. This isn't about getting open. This is about simple availability. And as I'm sure Hop will be able to exclude to as well on this show, you cannot make the club in the tub.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
But what about
So
that
he
other part of
has
the
to-
equation, though, Nate? The relationship between quarterback and receiver, the trust factor. You know, we know that
Yeah,
Will Levis has this trust with D-Hop, of course, but the fact that he
yes,
doesn't
no
necessarily
question,
find
Hop.
him consistently. Yeah, go talk about that a little bit.
No question. But as we both stated, you can't get relationship if you're not there, if you're not present.
Yep.
I'm sure from extra work after practice or extra work before practice, whether it's communicating about a route they've seen, whether it's communicating about something that didn't happen. The point is, with Hop being on that field, him and Will are able to communicate on a different level of understanding. Will understands what Hop is capable of. He knows him in and out his breaks. He knows what he's thinking on zone coverage. He knows what he's thinking on man-to-man. Those things are only able to happen if you put in the time and the work. That's not just, in-game reps. That's practice. That's after practice reps. That's watching film together. And Traylon it's impossible for Traylon to get the feel for Will and Will to get the feel for Traylon if they don't even have practice reps to go over. If they don't even have, film and clips of Traylon running routes and Will missing him so they can get an understanding of what is expected moving forward. These things are a problem because Traylon's not out there. He's not practicing. He's not playing in games. He's not doing any of these things. So that has to be Traylon's number one priority moving into this offseason. I don't care what you do. I don't care how you do it. Your body must be prepared to play not only in 17 games next year, but you must be reliable and accountable for training camp, for spring. That is important. You sharpen your tool in the off season. You use your tool during the season. And he's not sharpening his tool in the off season, in my opinion, and being prepared for the National Football League. This is no longer Arkansas. You are no longer in college. You no longer have accounting on Monday. You have Mike Vrabel on Monday. So he has to understand that.
He is Nate Washington. Hey, we appreciate the transparency there. Incredible stuff today. And I believe you're going to be at the game on Sunday, right?
I will be there.
Let's go. Fourth quarter?
Looking forward to it.
Hey, we appreciate you, Nate. We'll see you on Sunday and see if the Titans can get that dub.
All right, Nate Dogg.
Definitely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Appreciate you. That is Nate Washington, former Titans wide receiver, not holding back when it comes to Traylon Burks. Let's react to that. We open up the phone lines, 615-747-1045. We want to hear what you think about Nate Washington, kind of just laying down the facts there. That's coming up next on RKW here on 1045 The Zone. Welcome back to Arcade Dub on this, shall I say, after that interview with Nate Washington, Fiery Friday.
Ooh, I like what you did there.
You like
Fiery
that?
Friday.
Yeah. I feel like it got everybody just rejuvenated here. Because, hey, everybody's dealing with the flu. Some people, have got the colds, and maybe you're tuning in on a day off or just driving into work and feeling not great. Maybe that got the blood boiling. And you know what? I think he had some really great honest takes with him joining us in that last segment. And one of the biggest takes, just Treylon Burks and the future of him here in Tennessee. And Nate Washington saying he's really not convinced that he can be that number one guy moving forward.
The thing is, he kept mentioning the first pick. And there's a lot of expectation that comes along with being the first pick. Okay, not saying the first pick of the draft, but first pick by a team.
Yeah, first round.
If he were a second or third round pick, then people would say, well, maybe he's on par for the course. This is what we'd expect from a guy that was picked 115 or, maybe 82nd or something like that. But when you're the first pick, there's a level of expectation, especially with what you were replacing. So I think that that's one of the things that he's taken in consideration when talking about the career so far of Treylon Burks. The expectation that we put on a first rounder, and are you living up to that billing? If not, then it's easy to say that, hey, you know what? You needed to improve your game because you were the first pick of a draft. You were the investment that a team made on day one, and you need to start making a difference. Because anybody other than that, you've got less degree of difficulty. I mean, Puka Nacua probably didn't have that much pressure coming into the season. Why? Because he was a fifth rounder.
Yeah, and he's overachieving, and he's incredible.
Right. But now you expect more from him because he's the go-to guy for Matthew Stafford, regardless of Cooper Kupp coming back into the lineup healthy or not. But he didn't come into this out of training camp being like, we need to get Puka going. We need to make sure that he has the kind of season that gives us a chance to win. That's not the way they came into it looking. But with Treylon Burks, that's exactly what we were expecting.
Well, and not only that, we were expecting it because he was a guy that, you saw A.J. Brown get traded away to move up to get. I mean, that's the other thing. What pressure or not, whether you like the pressure or not, it was going to be on him in this situation. Yeah. So let's head out to the phone lines and get your thoughts. AG in Nashville, what do you think about Treylon Burks? What do you think about Nate Washington's take there?
I think it's just even more testimonial why J-Rob got fired, though. I mean, I'm looking forward to Josh Wild being a better player than him, honestly. And something else I wanted to hit on, too, is all the experts and stuff, most of the experts are saying that, Vrabel is due another season, but a lot of the fans just don't went nuts, though. Like, talking about Mike Vrabel signed off on the Burks draft pick and this and that, and it's just the fan base just done went crazy, though, man. But, yeah, Treylon Burks, man, I done pretty much gave up on him. I done seen him flash, like, a couple of times, but man, like I said, it's just another testament to why J-Rob is out of here. That's all I got.
We appreciate you, AG. And look, I asked the question to Mike Vrabel earlier this week. I said, what is it going to take, in terms of Treylon getting into a groove? I mean, he's got to stay healthy, right? Because that's how he's going to be able to build off of any type of momentum. I mean, he has not been able to create any of that. And because he's just not been healthy. And the more time goes on, the less and less opportunity you have. So, I mean, next season, he'll be here.
Yeah, but Treylon is a 7-catch, 150-yard receiving day from being somebody that's relevant.
Yeah.
That's how fast he can turn around.
And that's true, too. But then, guess what, Brad? He can have a day like that, but if he's not going to stay on the field and then he gets hurt, what do you build off of? Nothing. Whether he likes it or not, and whether it's his fault or not, if he can't stay healthy and build off of that type of day, he's not going to be that guy.
Yeah. Chemistry also developing between he and Will Levis, much like the ones we see with D-Hop. D-Hop can make chemistry with anybody, right? Mm-hmm. So Treylon has to have that. That's why I brought up that trust factor, the relationship that those guys have. Because if they take D-Hop away, he's got to go someplace else with the football. Do I feel trusted enough that he's going to win his one-on-one? Because they're not double-teaming Treylon. Right? Because if they were double teaming Treylon, that means the D-Hop is open for that huge catch radius to make a difference. But that's not been the case.
No, it hasn't. We'll continue to get your calls on the other side. Wow, 3 hours down, 1 to go. Put those fours up. It is the 4th hour of RK We'll talk more about that. Plus, David Ubben of The Athletic. We'll get into a little college talk in the 9:20 hour. That's all coming up on RK on 104.5 The Zone.
What's going on? 901. Good morning from the 1045 The Zone Studios. I'm Robert Walsh. Some good news on the Titans injury report as Will Levis was back at practice, but one step forward, two steps back for this Titans offense as guard Daniel Brunskill and tackle Jalen Duncan both missed practice after being limited on Wednesday. In Jacksonville, pretty much the same as wide receivers Zay Jones and Christian Kirk remain limited. Trevor Lawrence was also limited once again, but did throw during team's open practice period, dealing with a shoulder and a finger injury. Jacksonville can clinch the AFC South with a win over the Titans this weekend on Sunday. And in Baltimore, signing four-time Pro Bowl running back Dalvin Cook to the Ravens practice squad after successfully passing through waivers yesterday. Baltimore in need of some running back depth after injuries early in the season to J.K. Dobbins and losing Keaton Mitchell a few weeks ago in Jacksonville. Left the Ravens with a bare cupboard at running back. Cook solves that issue. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and the Vols. This is 1045 The Zone.
The show moves into the final hour. Throw those fours up here on Ramon, Kayla, and Will. We are definitely brewed up this morning, even more so than in days past by 8th and Roast, because I made the coffee this morning, folks, and it is strong.
Strong.
Strong with a capital S. They're locally owned and operated by lifetime friends turned business partners who design these local shops, 4 of them right here in Middle Tennessee, as a way to feel welcomed, connected, and a part of a community doing just that. I'm Kayla Anderson alongside our good friend Brad Hopkins, filling in for Ramon Foster today. Will Bowling off as well. And Robert Walsh back there doing all the behind-the-scenes dirty business. But he's clean. I promise you. He washed his hair this morning. I can tell you that. He gave me a head shake on that one. We welcome in you for this final hour, and we've had some good conversation in the last hour. Nate Washington joined the show, kind of gave his truthful thoughts on the Traylon Burks situation, as well as just the Titans season in general. Mike Vrabel, in terms of, whether or not he believes he should be the head coach moving forward. We're going to have that up on YouTube here soon. We've clipped that whole segment, and I'll make sure to retweet it out on my personal account and Ramon, Kayla, and Will. So we're going to get out to your calls here first and foremost, because we've got some more on the line talking about Traylon Burks. Let's go out to Jason in Murfreesboro. Jason, what's up?
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I kind of wanted to touch a little bit with what Nate was saying. I understand sometimes an injury you can't do anything about. Sometimes it takes time to heal. And I do understand, you have to fight through some injuries. So my point is, when you're evaluating these players in college and you're looking at them, me personally would more like to have a person that can play through injury, or somebody that recovers fast through injuries, instead of getting somebody that hasn't had an injury before and then they get an injury and you don't know how they're going to recover, if they're a fast recovery or not. So if you get somebody that's already, kind of hurt, not like somebody that's like a season-ending injury, but somebody that can play through injuries, that's the ones you want to go for, not somebody that hasn't had an injury before.
Thank you, Jason. And look, you can also look to the other side of that, and some guys who have had injuries that were drafted to this Titans team that haven't worked out at all. And Traylon Burks did have some injuries in college, but it wasn't anything like where you could look at that and go, oh my gosh, that could be a big issue in the future. That was never really the talk coming out of the draft. It's hard because everything's been different for him. It's been concussions, it's been the knees, and it hasn't been necessarily those soft tissue injuries where you can really start to pinpoint that can be an issue for a player.
Yeah, I just think that your running back shouldn't have more targets than your number one receiver. Now,
which it
admittedly,
does.
Traylon has only been available for 10 games versus King Henry being available for 16 games. That will be the difference. But I just think in relation to how he's used in the offense, when available, it's not like this huge trust factor has existed to where he's the first read, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to 10 first, and maybe even the time in the pocket dictates where you go from there. If I only have time to go through one, maybe two reads in my progression, and Traylon isn't that first read, then guess what? He very rarely is going to see those opportunities that would give us more of an indication of who Traylon Burks actually is. So I'm not going to say that protection, once again, is an issue, but it is part of the metric. Because if I can't sit back there in the pocket and go through D-Hop, Chig, and then find Traylon, because obviously Traylon is not the first guy I'm keying on when I first break the huddle. If he was, then he'd be winning his one-on-ones. He'd be creating those big down the field explosive plays that would warrant the attention. And then other things can filter in after that. Then 10 would be the 2, like he legitimately supposed to be. But that hasn't been the case. So I'm going to say that the lack of time in the pocket then does contribute to those 10 games that he is available to whether or not he gets the targets, therefore the completions and the yards that we would say are necessary for a number 1 draft pick to have. And that's what we keep going back to, the first pick of the draft.
Yep.
Because I'm telling you, and I'll go back to what I said just a minute ago, reiterating the fact that had he been picked in any other round other than the first one, our expectation would be tabled a little bit. It wouldn't be near as high as it is for a guy that's supposed to be, with that draft pick, a compliment to who A.J. Brown was to this offense.
And that's why I think sometimes on this show, we've gone back to the talent on this roster right now. Why are we seeing just not exactly that compared to other teams? And you look at J. Rob's misses, and he's had some hits when he was here, but the misses have been huge because they've been first-round misses. And I'm not saying that Traylon Burks is a bust yet, but he hasn't been on the field to prove, I think, what people expected him to be at this point, at least in his second year, and see a big jump. Those first-round misses have really plagued this team, and you're seeing it right now. So you've got to keep that in mind. Let's go out to Micah real quick. Micah, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. So the Titans are going to win this game this weekend. They haven't won a single divisional game this weekend, and we got to remember last year when Jacksonville knocked us out of the playoffs and winning the division. We got to knock them out of winning the division this year. Titans need to tighten up this weekend. We got the last game with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. Probably at least one of those guys are going to be on. Titans got to win this one. They've got to win this one. Titans need some hope going into the offseason. Thanks for taking my call.
Hey, Micah, we always appreciate you calling in from Nolensville. I like the optimism. You got to have a little optimism going into this weekend, right?
No, see, I like what Micah's perspective on it. It was mine that I had last week when I was on Blaine and Mickey's show, and I called my shot, and I said that the Houston Texans were going to go down to the Titans last week. Well, first off, I bleed blood. I mean, the blue, of course. It's the only franchise I've ever been a part of, so I'm going to think that way. But I also was taking the same things that Micah's taking into consideration. A couple of players that could be for their last time on this roster. The fact that we could play the role of the spoiler. Putting it all together. There's nothing to play for next Sunday, so why not just pull all the stops and just lay it out there, right? But I also saw the team that they're playing against have more incentive. The Jags are trying to win this division, and they're trying to position themselves for games after the Week 17 marker, right? So with that being said, I think you're going to get the best Jaguars team that you can have. Now, fortunately, the best Jaguar team that you're going to see on the field isn't 100%, because regardless of Trevor Lawrence's availability, he's not going to be that effective guy that we've seen in the past because he is injured. He is coming back after dealing with the shoulder. And we're the only NFL team that has 2 double-digit sack leaders. Danico Autry and, of course, Harold Landry. One of those is Arden Key. One of those is an alternate in Danico Autry. So we should be able to get to the quarterback, create some situations to where maybe Micah's his prognostication will come true. The Titans do get a W this weekend at home.
And you were talking about incentives to win. And look, particular players have incentives built into their contracts. Arden Key is one of those guys. He actually, and you were right, Harold Landry and Danico with double digits. Arden Key has 6 sacks this season, which means he will need to record 2 sacks this weekend to get $500,000. $500,000 more dollars if he gets, like I said, 2 sacks this weekend. And that would be a career high for him.
Yeah. And I think that when you look at incentives and the more obtainable incentives, like I'm saying that D-Hop could get that 750.
And that was the other one, right?
Yeah. Because he only needs, 7 catches, 39 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. Can that happen in this offense in one game? Yes. Now, Derrick Henry running for 186 yards in a game, I'd like to see that happen for his farewell if that's the case. But I doubt that he makes that $500,000 that he would get if he were to rush for 1,300 yards, because that's how far away he is. But the 2 sacks, I can definitely see 2 sacks happening for Arden Key this weekend.
How much would that did you get motivated ever by those types of things, or did your teammates, and even if it was a losing season?
Let me say this. When you go to the Pro Bowl, there's a difference in the winning and the losing purse, right? If that game was close at the end, you're going to see some whole bunch of dudes strapping up that chin strap, because that could probably absorb the cost of all the people that you brought over to the game anyway, right?
Yeah.
Versus the ones that you would make as a loser in the game. So if the incentive is closer to be obtained, then I think that you start to see people pay attention to that and start stepping up a little bit. I guarantee you Arden Key rushes the passer just a little bit harder, knowing that there's $500,000 on the line if he can bring that guy down just 2 more times.
I'd agree with you on that. Well, we'll change gears here, headed into the 920 segment of Ramon, Kayla, and Will. David Ubben, we haven't heard from him in a while on this show, at least. He will join us. He is of The Athletic. Great work done there, because we've got a big game in terms of the national championship in college football. Coming up on Monday, we'll break it down and see what he has to say about Michigan and Washington. Who's favored going into this one for him? We answer that question next, coming up on Ramon, Kayla, and Will, here on 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back in to this Friday, fine Friday here in Middle Tennessee. It's Ramon, Kayla, and Will. Kayla Anderson, Brad Hopkins filling in for Ramon Foster, Will Bowling with the day off. And joining us now on the hotline, good friend, and we haven't talked to you in a while, David Ubben, the national college football writer for The Athletic. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us this morning. And a big weekend as we prepare for the national championship game. I know you're very, very busy right now, and so much great work that you do on The Athletic. And I want people to go and actually read the article. But give us a synopsis here. You actually teamed up with Bruce Feldman, talked to 10 coaches who faced Michigan and UW, Washington, this season. And they're kind of more sold on one team than the other, right?
Yeah, I think the majority of them like the underdog to win the title in Washington, and I can't say I'm super surprised at that, but it was definitely interesting, and some of their insights and some of their takeaways from the semis were pretty interesting.
Yeah, this is obviously two teams with two different styles. Great stories for them both headed into this one. In terms of, Michael Penix Jr. and his journey, though, how surprised have you been with how he's been rejuvenated in his career?
Well, I think the biggest thing was he just had to stay healthy. When he was healthy at Indiana, he was really, really good. And playing behind this offensive line is a great way to stay healthy. He's only been sacked 11 times this year, 0 times in the semifinal against Texas. So, for him, it was always just health. He could play. The arm strength, the accuracy has always kind of been there, and he's really grown. And now in his 6th year of playing college football, the way he sees the field is pretty impressive. And one of the things that the coaches that we talked to called out, pretty frequently is just the amount of trust and chemistry that he has in receivers. And one coach was saying, it doesn't make sense, some of the balls that he throws, because, when he throws it, he's like, if you turn on the tape and you pause it, the guy's not open. Half the time he hasn't made his break, but they have such a chemistry. He's like, off-season 7-on-7 must be crazy because he just knows exactly where to put the ball, and that's an unbelievable skill that comes with experience.
David, the matchup following the semifinals makes it look like the playoff committee got it right. Florida State is out of the mix. Georgia obviously held the number 1 spot for most of the year, but they get bounced out in the SEC championship game. They're no longer playing for the Natty. Did the playoff committee get it right with the matchup between Michigan and UW this week on Monday?
Well, it's a complicated question, right? Because I think if you're looking at, who are the 4 best teams, as you want to define it, I think if you want to make the case that Florida State is not one of those, then yeah, I totally agree with that. But in the same breath, if you want to say that they went undefeated, proved themselves in the ACC championship game, and obviously, played a season and they had a resume that was worthy of being included, despite being without Jordan Travis. I mean, I think that the decision set all kinds of very troubling precedents that I don't think are good for the sport. But I think in the same breath, you can say we got some pretty special semifinals. And to me, it doesn't make sense because if you want to say that Alabama's better than Florida State, I mean, Georgia's been the best team all year, so that doesn't really hold water. So I hated what they did to Florida State personally, but I also thought that we were going to get better semifinal games because of it. And robbing a team like that did everything that they could possibly do and wasn't even given an opportunity, that hurts as a college football fan to see, because I don't think that precedent is good. But we did get 2 really good semifinals, and I think we're going to get a pretty good national championship game too. Yeah,
looking at that Bama-Michigan semis, the narrative around that game was that Nick Saban, the great Nick Saban, the Godfather, was out-coached by Jim Harbaugh and company. Do you think that they were out-coached, basically?
I mean, it would help them if they had a center that
oh, my goodness.
I mean, that was killing them. That's been an issue all year, and it got worse in the championship, or in the semifinal. So that was not what you want to see. I mean, they got outplayed, absolutely. They got off to a hot start, but Michigan was the better team in that ball game. And, I don't know about outcoached. I think ultimately the biggest thing that jumped out to me was all of the 5-man protections they had in the first half that they clearly couldn't block. That Michigan was scheming up, getting free rushers, and, Jalen Milroe, I think, was, sacked 5 times early. And for a guy that's that athletic, that takes a lot. And so I thought that was the biggest schematic thing that didn't really make sense to me, that they kept on going back to that and kept on going back to that. It took them a long time to adjust and be like, hey, we can't block this. And I think once they figured that out, it helped them a little bit. But that, I don't know about outcoach. I think they just, Michigan played a much better game, and they were able to exploit the flaws that we've seen in Alabama all season long, the skill position talent, just the precision passing game that isn't necessarily there. And the offensive line, they've not been able to protect. They got a lot better the last month of the year. But they were outside the top 100 in pressure rate for a good chunk of the season. And so Michigan exploited that, and Georgia was not able to.
David Ubben of The Athletic joining us this morning on RKW. So I'm sure you got to watch a little bit of the Tennessee game against Iowa in the Citrus Bowl, and clearly Nico Iamaleava, first time as a starter and pretty good showing. I guess for Vols fans, they're pretty excited. But how do you see, with this momentum headed into next season, Iamaleava really being put on the scene as one of the quarterbacks in college football next year?
Mm-hmm. First off, I think you need to teach a tutorial on the name pronunciation, because that was perfection. I think you've been practicing.
Thanks, David.
That was impressive stuff, because it's going to be a long off season for the Iamaleava family, because it is it's going to take a while. The Tagovailoas figured it out. They learned that, but it's going to be a rough start for him. I think the biggest thing is just expectations. Like, he's not going to walk in and be throwing for 45 touchdowns and 4,500 yards, and every game is 400 yards and 4 touchdowns and no turnovers. Like, it's always a little bit tough his first year as a starter. But you want to see flashes. You want to see him grow and have that opportunity. And so I think the biggest thing is just going to be managing some of those expectations. But the skill level obviously is there. You got to be able to see the field, and that's a little bit easier in this offense, because a lot of the reads in this offense are half-field reads, and that's why you see a lot of quarterbacks that don't have a lot of natural talent thrive in this offense. We've seen it for a decade, and he obviously has a ton of natural talent. And the guys, when you get a quarterback in this offense that is special, you can really do some big-time things. And so, he's got to have some targets. They need Brew McCoy to stay healthy, to be helpful, for them. And so you got to have some targets. You need to have Squirrel White make a leap and all those things. So it's going to be interesting. And Tennessee was not the most compelling team this year. They didn't have a ton of big-time wins, didn't have a ton of sort of losses that left you scratching your head. They sort of just took care of business. But the expectations will be up a little bit next year. But they got to stay managed, I think.
Who do you see in the SEC, and now Texas and Oklahoma joining next year? Who do you see maybe the team that surprises some people and makes a run at that 12-team playoff?
A run at the 12-team playoff. Well, it'd be interesting to see if Ole Miss can actually win a couple games in the playoff. I think they're a team that, what they've done in the off season in terms of loading up and winning in the transfer portal and adding so many guys. Getting Walter Nolan, adding Tyler Barron. We'll see what happens with the running back spot. Losing Quinshon Judkins was pretty huge, obviously. So I don't know if they'd be a surprise, because they're probably going to start the preseason in the top 10. But I got to say, if I'm looking for a surprise, year 2 under Liam Cohen, you keep Mark Stoops, you add Brock Vandegrift, you still have those really good receivers. Keep an eye on Kentucky, I guess, if you're looking for a surprise.
Hey, you know what, David? I can see a whole new pattern developing as far as players staying at a program for their entire eligibility. Just the fact that you're starting to see 2 and 3 stars developing over, a couple of seasons at one program, all of a sudden feel better about their ability and then start transferring. If you look at the mature players that, say, Washington has, they have 10 players that are grad students, right? And what was mentioned most about their calm and their ease at dealing with situations that happen in the game, those mature players seem to handle those situations better. So do you see the transfer portal now maybe even changing the whole, trajectory of how we see players and the length that they stay at one school?
I think Washington is an outlier, and they're willing to talk about that quite a bit. 9 6-year players is pretty wild. I think that speaks to the culture. I think ultimately the sport is changing a lot, and the my way or the highway sort of approach if you're not at Bama or Georgia, it's going to be difficult because getting on the highway has never been easier than it is right now. So I think for me, when I talk to people around the sport and when I kind of analyze things, I think the biggest thing, and it sounds simple, but it's hard to do in practice, is do you have a roster that wants to come to the facility every day? Mm-hmm. And how you develop that is difficult. And doing that and still being able to succeed is not the easiest thing in the world. But if you could have that, that would be the best thing for your culture in terms of retaining players. You've got to have a well-funded collective. You've got to have good schemes, good relationships, all of those things. But if guys want to come to the facility every day and have good relationships and you have a tight team, that's going to do wonders for your talent retention and give you a shot to have a team that does have a bunch of guys that stick around for a long time.
What do you think about the collectives now having some say in the talent that most of these schools get? I mean, we looked at I guess it was a quarterback that was maybe in a 5-star that signed to Ohio State, but that deal wasn't inked until the money got right, basically. So do you think that, I guess someone outside of the staff itself having some influence on these kids makes that much of a difference in today's college football?
Well, that's the case for now. I think a lot of schools want to bring this operation in-house. And if you look at, a lot of the proposals that Charlie Baker put out this offseason, the last couple months and where things are headed, the collective model doesn't really make sense. And they sort of legislated themselves into this weird place and being handcuffed by the courts. The idea that you don't want to have anything resembling revenue sharing, but you want to outsource paying your players to boosters and fans is ridiculous, patently. And so that's what you sort of get, but I think we're headed towards something resembling employment. We're headed towards something resembling revenue sharing. Whether it's explicit or not, I think is still unclear, and we'll see where we get to. But the idea that the collective model as we know it now is going to be still relatively unchanged, 3 to 5, 10 years from now, I am very skeptical of that.
David Ubben of The Athletic joining us now. When it comes to the 12-team playoff next year, and you're still going to have those bowl games, what is your take on keeping bowl games? It clearly is a moneymaker, but getting guys to play in them, you're going to you have to give them some incentives, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be tough outside of the 12th stuff. I think the G5 games where it's G5 versus G5, or whatever we want to call them now that it's more of a power 2 situation. That I think will always be okay. But these the bowl games that are right outside of the top 12 will always be a little bit difficult. And ultimately, I don't know that just paying guys or finding a way to monetize that is going to always work, because risking your health for $50,000 and risking what every player believes is a bright NFL future doesn't always make sense. So I don't know that it's necessarily about keeping guys playing. I think it's about embracing fun, making it a big event, doing dumb things. I mean, obviously the Pop-Tart Bowl, the Mayo Dump, all of the food stuffs and all of that stuff I think is really good for bowl season because it's fun. It makes people want to watch. But at the end of the day, the opt-outs haven't really affected the TV ratings, which is sort of what makes all this happen. And it's disappointing to see the bowls become something sort of different, but people still want to watch because they're still taking place around the holidays. You're around the family, you're sort of hanging out. People are going to watch, and I watch, and millions of others join me. So the bowl system is broken, but still profitable. And, in America in 2023, there are worse things to be. But there's nothing worse, of course, than being unprofitable.
When it comes to Ohio State and just the dominance that Michigan has had over them recently, do you see Ohio State in any way? And they've been a team that has been relevant for a really long time, but just hasn't been able to win those big games under Ryan Day, especially those rivalry games with Michigan. They just got Will Howard, obviously the Kansas State transfer. Where is Ohio State in terms of football right now?
Well, they're in a pivotal spot. I would recommend not losing to Michigan again. I mean, Michigan is at a weird spot themselves because the program is about to hit a pretty big reset button, and whether or not Jim Harbaugh is there for that reset is interesting. But they're going to be losing a ton. I mean, I think that rivalry is about to flip, but you've got to win games in the playoff because Ohio State, just getting into the playoff like they probably will next year, it's not going to be enough to satisfy the fan base. You got to beat Michigan. You got to win games in the playoff and win national titles. I'm not sure that Will Howard is that guy, but maybe we're wrong. And, they've got to reboot their receiver room as well. They'll be losing Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming transferred over to Penn State. So Ohio State's in a bit of a weird spot. Their running back room is still pretty good. The offensive line should be better next year. But I think for them, the good news about the Michigan rivalry is it's hard to see Michigan rebounding and beating them next year just based on everything that they're losing. But that may not be enough to sort of satisfy people from Ryan Day's perspective.
Well, let's talk about Monday. Obviously, January 8th features the Natty. It's Kalen DeBoer versus Jim Harbaugh. That Michigan run-heavy style offense versus the air raid of the Washington Huskies. I like Michael Penix Jr. I think that rightfully so. He should have been in the Heisman discussion. They've got some top talented players, especially on that receiving core. But what are you tipping your hat towards? That running style that maybe keeps the ball out of Michael Penix's hands and that vaunted defense from Michigan? Or will that air raid basically just soar and take flight?
Yeah, I think it's tough because ultimately Washington has not played a defense like this or a running game like this, and Michigan has not played anything close to an offense like this. I think the last time that Washington played a defense that was in the top 40 was Stanford last season, like in October. It's been a while. So that's a long time. They're going to be able to put points up. I think the reality is that there is this idea because Washington throws the ball so much, that they're soft, that the defense is very good. Their defense is not elite, but it's good enough, I think. And ultimately, in games like these, when you go up against elite offenses, they're going to score points. And I think Washington can score enough, and a lot of times the quarterbacks are the difference makers in these games. If you're down 3 in the fourth quarter, I like one of these quarterbacks to make the play that wins you the ball game more than the other, and I like Michael Penix to do that.
Yeah, it's not
Washington.
It's a no-brainer that Alabama was in the conversation because they seem to be always in the conversation. An SEC school for the first time hasn't been represented in the Natty for in the last 9 years. But my question is about Texas. Obviously, we know how good college football would be when Texas is relevant. Are they back, in your opinion, David?
Yeah, I think ultimately, yes, because they built to back up on the offensive and the defensive lines. The thing about Texas in the Big 12, and one of the biggest reasons why people around the league sort of rolled their eyes, it has been a long, 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 long time since Texas was the toughest team in the Big 12. And obviously they got to go to the SEC next year, but they were the toughest team in the Big 12. They pushed people around. Steve Sarkisian, for as much reputation as he has an offensive design, play designer and play caller, he built that team from the inside out. And you look at guys like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy and the things that they were able to do on the line of scrimmage this year. That's how you got Texas back. And I don't think we had seen that a lot. We saw a lot of wasted talent, a lot of wasted big bodies, at the end of the Mac Brown era, throughout the Charlie Strong era, at moments in the Tom Herman era. And I think building up the lines, if you look at why Georgia, why Alabama, why Ohio State, Michigan this year, why they have thrived and been so sustainable, is they keep having great, great linemen. And Steve Sarkisian is the first Texas coach in a while, since the heyday of the Mac Brown era, since Roy Miller was rolling around there in 2008, 2009, to have just these big uglies up front that dominate the game. And for that reason, I think Texas is definitely back.
It's going to be big uglies.
I love it.
You mean big guys can't be good looking too? Come on, man.
David, Brad Hopkins here was a big ugly. David Ubben, we appreciate you. National college football writer for The Athletic. Have a great weekend and a great time covering the college football national championship on Monday.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. You can go follow him at David Ubben. Really good work there for The Athletic. I cannot believe, man, we are about wrapping up the show. One more segment to come here on RK We'll take your phone calls if you want to call in. 615-737-1045 as we wrap up the show next on RK 1045 The Zone.